One night, when everything was already covered in silence and darkness, a document arrived announcing the decision of the committee to enroll a new student at the university, which caused excitement among those who were aware of this important event. Behind the massive closed doors, under the strict protection of guards, suddenly loud and unexpected cries of a baby were heard, disrupting the usual order and echoing in the silence of the palace corridors. The maid, completely horrified by what had happened, suddenly recoiled, barely holding back a scream, and anxiously announced that a girl had been born, and not the long-awaited heir, as everyone expected. The little princess, who had just been born, screamed loudly, her voice sounding shrill and clear, as if expressing dissatisfaction with her sudden birth into this world. At that very moment, rumors began to spread among the maids, and they quietly whispered to each other, sincerely perplexed as to how such a strange event could have happened, contrary to everyone's expectations. The lady with fair hair, lying on the bed in the semi-darkness, realized the important news. A girl was born into the Velocian imperial family, which was an unexpected event for everyone. Suddenly, heavy footsteps were heard, and the man who entered irritably called the baby useless, noting that only boys, the continuers of the dynasty, were always supposed to be born in their family. The man turned out to be the emperor himself, with dark hair and bright, piercing eyes, dressed in rich clothes with a luxurious fur cape, which emphasized his status and power. Suddenly, everyone present noticed an unusual mark on the young princess's hand, a tattoo in the form of a watch, which upon closer inspection turned out to be much more disturbing than just decoration. The servants, suppressing their excitement, hastened to explain to their master that all who had ever borne such a mark rarely lived even to the age of 21. A sad fate inevitably overtook them, as if some evil fate had been imprinted on their bodies. The emperor, however, seemed unmoved by this ominous omen. With a majestic gesture, he waved his heavy cloak, turned away from the assembled company, and, coldly and dispassionately, declared that the fate of his daughter did not concern him. A helpless female hand slowly reached forward, desperately trying to reach her child, as if hoping to protect him, even for a moment, from the cruel world around him. Holding back tears, the woman quietly asked her daughter for forgiveness for bringing her into this harsh, unjust world, where the cruel laws of patriarchy rule and where tenderness is rarely reciprocated. The beautiful little girl, not understanding the full depth of what was happening, stretched out her tiny palms towards her mother, trying to touch her and find comfort in her eyes, looking at her with innocent sadness and hope. The servant, with a knowing smile, gently supported the little princess, helping her to come closer to her mother, who lay exhausted on the bed after a difficult birth, still feeling weak, but with warmth in her eyes, looking at her child. The little girl, who had barely come into this world, smiled sweetly, as if mentally reassuring her mother. There was no need to be upset because she was not destined to become a sword master. After all, even without that, she already had a fairly lively mind and natural resourcefulness, which promised her another no less great path. Moreover, the princess, with an awareness surprising for her age, seemed to have a premonition of the coming changes, and knew about the future, about the time when the strongest people of this world would show their power, and magicians endowed with great strength would change the fate of all mankind. Mages, whose destinies and great achievements were destined to change this world, were spoken of with special trepidation. Their power was not simple magic, but a force capable of changing the fate of civilizations and the structure of reality itself. The reason why everything that was happening seemed so familiar was because this world had been carefully described in a novel she had recently read, which told of an ominous castle and a wicked villainess whose fate was tragically cut short. The Velocian family was one of the most ancient and powerful imperial dynasties, renowned not only for its strength, but also for its rich history dating back centuries, which caused them to be admired and feared in equal measure. In this family, where for 500 years only boys were born, heirs who embodied the strength of the family and supported its power, not mercy was valued, but pure strength and unwavering loyalty to ancient traditions. The Empress held the newborn girl tightly to her, feeling her heart squeeze with anxiety, because she realized that the birth of this little one had doomed her to eternal damnation and inevitable suffering that she could not avoid. When the girl first opened her eyes to a new world that she had previously only seen on the pages of a book, she was shocked, feeling that she was in a nightmare from which it was impossible to wake up, and thought that this was a terrible dream in which she was stuck. From birth, Isabel was fragile, sickly, and needed constant care, because her poor health did not allow her to calmly enjoy her childhood, as if fate itself had predetermined a difficult path. There was an ancient prophecy that the hourglass mark foretells the imminent death of its owner. When the last grain of sand falls in 21 years, the predicted curse will overtake him, depriving him of any hope of salvation. The Empress could not help but smile warmly as she watched her little daughter, clumsily patting her on the shoulder with her tiny hands, try to calm her down in her own sincere, childish way, as if she understood her mother's sadness. The little girl, trying with all her might to express her feelings and answer her mother, tried hard to say something, but instead of words, only indistinct sounds came out of her tiny mouth, like sweet, funny baby talk, filled with tenderness and warmth. In her home world of Korea, she was an orphan who battled a serious illness every day, which she could only cope with thanks to the kindness of others. All medical bills were paid through donations from caring people. With her sharp mind and tenacity, she was able to enter a prestigious university, but despite her determination, the disease proved stronger, taking her life, not giving her the long years she had hoped for. Barely concealing her doubt, the ruler asked whether her daughter, at such a young age, could really understand what she was talking about, since the little girl often seemed more mature and attentive than other children her age. With a slight smile, the maid confirmed that this was indeed the case, and added that the little princess might become a real genius, since her intelligence and curiosity were evident from the first months of her life. Laughing joyfully, the girl stretched out her tiny arms forward, as if she wanted to embrace everyone who was near her, as if she wanted to share her childish light and warmth with those around her. The girls could not help but smile in delight as they watched the little princess display such touching care and tenderness. Her tiny gestures and innocent look filled their hearts with warmth and affection. The mother, feeling a surge of endless love and care, pressed her baby even closer to her heart, praying for only one thing: that her daughter would grow up strong, healthy, and find everything that fate had destined for her. Since ancient times, in the beautiful empire there was a sacred and revered tradition, an ancient selection ceremony where swords were stuck into the ground, each of which was a symbol of past battles and glorious fights. Isabel couldn't take her admiring gaze off her favorite characters from the novel, feeling the joy of meeting them, because each of them seemed like family to her, like brothers and sisters whom she found again in this mysterious world. The maid gently picked up the little girl, who had just been happily crawling on the floor, awakening sincere affection in everyone around her with her naive, but such touching movements, as if her very essence was a source of childish joy and warmth. In the center of the great hall, surrounded by ornate thrones and stern guards, stood a black blade thrust into the ground. Its presence filled the atmosphere of the hall with mysterious power and commanded respect from all who dared to approach. This blade, named Tsunami, stood out for its dark, almost hypnotic black color, skillfully decorated with gold patterns and gemstones, making it shine with a sinister and captivating beauty. Throughout the centuries, during all the ceremonies of choosing heirs, princes always preferred to choose this sword among many others, which symbolically confirmed their noble origin and strong connection. With a tenacity worthy of admiration, little Isabel crawled forward, as if obeying an inner call, without even realizing that her determination to overcome this first test could turn out to be a real crisis for her. The Sword Council was a powerful and influential organization that served the emperor loyally, and among its members were hardliners who were categorically against the princess ever touching a sword. The pages of the novella stated that as soon as the little girl touched this legendary blade, a mysterious killer appeared before her, and only by a miracle did she manage to escape. Fate seemed to give her a second chance at a time when death was so close. However, she understood that she was not really Isabel, but only a wanderer from another world, and therefore one wrong move, one careless step, and instant death awaited her, as if death was waiting nearby. The little girl clenched her tiny hands into tight fists, feeling the resistance growing inside her. She was not at all happy with this arrangement, because she was striving for freedom and was not going to obediently follow her predetermined fate. Isabel could not come to terms with the idea that life could end so early, without giving her the opportunity to truly enjoy the company of all the characters from her favorite novel. In addition, a sincere love for sweets burned in her heart, and she firmly decided that she would definitely try all the delicious desserts that she could find, because her world was filled with bright and enticing aromas. In her past life, weakened by illness, Isabel was deprived of the opportunity to enjoy sweets, and even such simple pleasures as sweet carbonated drinks remained an inaccessible luxury for her. With a tenacity that could not fail to inspire admiration, Isabel crawled forward, overcoming every obstacle, because she realized that in order to change her fate and avoid the impending dangers, she had to move as far away from the original plot as possible. Suddenly, her father appeared before her, majestic and terrifying, sitting on the throne with a proud posture and an unyielding gaze, and he sternly ordered her, his little daughter, to finally make a choice and decide on the sword. Therefore, the girl, having decided to follow the laws of true cunning, decided to do it her own way instead of choosing a weapon. She firmly grabbed the edge of her father's cloak, hoping that this simple gesture would help her melt his cold heart. But then, suddenly remembering the mysterious killer who, according to her memories, was lurking somewhere in this hall, Isabel froze in place with fear and did not even dare to move. The little girl swayed unsteadily from side to side, trying to keep her balance. Despite all the experience and memories from her past life, her childish body did not yet have the necessary strength and agility. The guards, amazed and surprised, froze in their places, watching the little princess with wide eyes, not believing their eyes, and not understanding what prompted her to such unexpected and bold actions. Instead of choosing among the weapons offered to her, the little girl suddenly began to make strange, incomprehensible sounds, naive, funny, childish babble, which might have seemed stupid but was an attempt to appease her father. The emperor's eyes, glittering with an icy yellow gleam, remained impenetrable and full of restrained contempt. He considered this scene ridiculous, and he turned to his assistant, asking what this foolish child was trying to do. The assistant, realizing what was happening, leaned over and respectfully explained that perhaps the girl had remembered her mother's lullaby, a magical melody, a special gift that was very rare. The courtier respectfully explained that perhaps the girl had inherited a rare gift, having memorized her mother's magical song, which had special properties. This kind of magical music was considered amazing and extremely rare. The emperor, smiling, called the assistant's words absurd, but admitted that such a magical gift was indeed rare, and there was an element of unusualness in this, although difficult to explain for their kind. No one could understand how the little princess, who came from a family of warriors and swordsmen, could have a natural talent for magic spells that were so different from the traditions of her ancestors. Isabel, with a sad and slightly embarrassed smile, tried with all her might to climb the huge steps of the massive staircase, which in the woman's eyes seemed an almost insurmountable obstacle, forcing her to spend her last strength. Mentally encouraging herself, Isabel tried with incredible tenacity to climb the next steep step, putting in all her efforts, her tiny body trembling with tension, but she was not going to give up. Isabel was breathing heavily, and steam was escaping from her mouth, leaving white clouds in the cold air, the result of efforts and physical exertion to which her body was not yet accustomed, but her will was stronger than any obstacles. In her past life, when she was sick and weak, any attempt to take a deep breath would end in a painful cough and chest pain, but now, feeling strong, albeit small, she felt almost victorious. Pleased with herself, the emperor's little daughter turned around to admire the path she had traveled, and a wide, sincere smile shone on her woman's face, filled with joy and pride in herself and her strength. Pleased with herself, Isabel looked at the guards with a gleam in her eyes, sitting at the feet of her father, who stood on the throne like the pride of the kingdom, looking down at her with interest, waiting for what the next step would be. The emperor, inwardly surprised by the little princess's determination, watched her every move carefully, holding back his emotions, but clearly anticipating, because no child had ever dared to behave so confidently in front of him before. With a plucked-up courage and full of genuine joy, Isabel hugged her father's leg, feeling protected and, beaming with happiness, uttered her first word. Filled with warmth and simplicity, she tenderly addressed him as Daddy. The ruler, clearly not expecting such a display of affection, removed his face from his hand and rose slightly on the throne, trying to hide his surprise, because even he could not remain completely indifferent to this sincere childish impulse. Continuing to hug her father's leg, the little girl enjoyed the warmth emanating from his body, feeling completely safe, and her small palms held tightly to the fabric of his cloak, and she was happy to feel this touch. Suddenly another man approached them, who softly and lovingly called Isabel his sweet little sister, his voice sounding gentle and encouraging, as if he was ready to protect her from everything in the world. It was the emperor's eldest son, named Sermon. His dark hair and piercing red eyes, reflecting inner strength, were complemented by a friendly smile and snow-white robes that emphasized his origin. Isabel happily reached out to her older brother, smiling at him with her widest and most sincere childish smile, trying to greet him as best she could in her tiny body, which did not yet know confident and large movements. Suddenly, quick, clear footsteps echoed off the floor of the vast hall, announcing the approach of another figure. The sound of the footsteps was clear and confident, filling the space with tense anticipation and drawing attention. Soon the emperor's second and third sons, boys named Mikul and Kamen, both with shining blonde hair and bright eyes that reflected a genuine childish joy in life, ran up to them cheerfully. Isabel, feeling slightly embarrassed, shyly pressed herself against her father's leg and watched with interest as her older brothers began a friendly dispute, finding out which of them was the nicest. Their naive squabble made her smile sincerely. Unable to contain herself, the girl burst into a ringing laugh, and a blush appeared on her cheeks, which only added to her charm. The laughter was so sincere and infectious that it seemed that even the cold walls of the castle began to come to life. But suddenly she stopped short, noticing something strange out of the corner of her eye. Turning, she glanced cautiously over her shoulder to where the servants were standing, and saw that the guards who had been involved in the secret conspiracy had frozen silently in place. The guards who had been plotting the assassination froze, realizing that their plan had failed. Now that the attention of the emperor and his sons was directed at Isabel, they realized that any attempt to attack the princess was foolish. Isabel, sensing the moment, turned again to her father, and with her whole being drawn towards him, began to climb up, clinging with her tiny hands to the thick fabric of his trousers. Her little fingers held on tightly. She firmly decided that instead of choosing the sword as a symbol of protection, she would choose her father, counting on his powerful patronage, and thus deliberately change the plot of the novel, rewriting her destiny. Thanks to her persistence and dexterity, the little girl soon found herself on the ruler's lap, hugging his chest, and, without stopping, continued to call him father, putting all her childish tenderness and trust into this simple word. This caused surprise and amazement among all those present in the hall, and soon a slight hum of whispers and murmurs could be heard, as if everyone could not believe their eyes that the little princess had made such an unexpected choice. The emperor's assistant, standing nearby, placed his hand on his chest in a sign of respect, and bowing his head, solemnly announced to his master that it seemed the princess had made her final choice, and this decision could not go unnoticed. With a slight smile, he turned to the girl, asking for her confirmation, and, to the delight of the audience, the little girl nodded with a serious look, loudly and confidently making an affirmative sound, making it clear that she had consciously chosen her father. Baitan, the faithful courtier, declared with evident approval that the girl had made a wise choice, but was soon interrupted when the emperor, who did not like this unexpected turn of events, gave a sign. With a cold severity in his voice and a burning gaze that seemed icy, the emperor asked ironically whether the courtier seriously believed that it was reasonable to have a serious conversation with a baby and draw conclusions from his simple childish actions. Realizing the danger of falling under the ruler's wrath, Baitan, however, stood firm and, without losing his composure, continued to explain to his master that there were cases in history when children, even at a young age, possessed special gifts. Kneeling before the emperor, Biden, in a show of respect and humility, prepared to defend his point of view to the end, proving that his words and observations were not mere fiction. The man asked the girl in a reserved manner if she really understood what he was talking about, and in response, the child immediately began to actively nod her head, happily confirming her agreement, her eyes shining with lively interest. Bowing his head and smiling faintly, the young courtier explained to the girl that her father, being extremely stubborn from childhood, always believed that if he himself could not do something, then it was also inaccessible to others. Isabel laughed merrily, clapping her hands loudly with pleasure, while the courtier told her about his own talents and special abilities that, despite her young age, distinguished her from other children and allowed her to perceive the world differently. Ron, her father, was an extremely proud and stubborn boy from a very young age, with an unwavering confidence in achieving all his goals, always getting what he wanted, and developing qualities in himself. However, Isabel tensed up when she heard the emperor sternly declare that all the courtier's arguments had not convinced him, and that everything he had said before was just meaningless nonsense, unworthy of attention, as if he had deliberately devalued it. Keeping a calm expression on his face and smiling good-naturedly, Biden, with a sly squint, asked the princess, without losing her mood, to wink back at him, hoping that childish spontaneity could soften the stern gentleman. Isabel, deciding to obey his request, curiously closed one eye, carrying out the command with childish spontaneity, and her naive yet charming gesture brought a note of warmth to the atmosphere, making many smile. After this, Isabel, as if playing, winked with cheerful determination with her other eye, trying with all her might to prove to her strict and respected father that she perfectly understood everything that was being discussed and with what message they were addressing her. The empress, proud and with a sense of calm satisfaction, sat nearby, happily watching her children, the little princes, who, as if enchanted, gazed intently at their inventive sister, admiring the deed. Biden, seeing such an eloquent display of confidence and resourcefulness, curiously asked the ruler whether he now accepted this as convincing proof of his daughter's genius, to which he, hiding a smile and some pride, only responded with silence. Suddenly the girl clearly felt that she began to slide and fall from her father's lap, and she was overcome by a slight feeling of fear and helplessness as her body began to succumb to this unexpected downward movement. A man's hand, strong and fast, immediately shot forward to break her fall, as if the protective instinct had kicked in faster than one might think, catching the girl before she could get scared. At this moment, strong and beautiful, Ron gripped her outfit tightly, keeping the baby from an inevitable fall and returning her former stability, and along with it, confidence. The courtiers were extremely surprised by such a sharp and tender gesture from the emperor. They literally opened their eyes wide in surprise, not being accustomed to seeing in him manifestations of paternal tenderness at such a moment. With slight awkwardness, but trying not to show her embarrassment, the princess began to answer her father's questions about why she chose to choose him, a strict parent, as her support and protector. Without thinking twice and showing respect for his daughter's decision, the ruler confidently handed her over to his faithful assistant, who, showing respect and caution, readily accepted such a valuable cargo. Rising with majesty and calm from his throne, Ron asked the courtier which of the famous blades the princess had chosen for herself, which was a very significant choice in the eyes of those present. With a warm smile on his face, bowing slightly in respect, Biden announced to everyone gathered that the young princess had made a wise decision and chosen her father as the empire's strongest weapon. Meanwhile, the secretary, maintaining an impassive expression on his face and carefully taking notes, meticulously wrote down everything that was said in an open book with each word, not missing a single important detail in order to preserve the memory of this event. The courtiers, sharing their joy and pride for the princess, began to clap their hands, expressing sincere admiration for her choice, because the decision to devote her devotion to her father instead of traditional weapons showed inner strength and wisdom. The ceremony ended solemnly and successfully, and the people gathered in the hall gave sincere applause to the imperial family, congratulating them on this moment and on their hopes for the future of the dynasty, of which the princess became a symbol. Feeling suddenly dizzy, Isabel, barely containing her fear, thought of only one thing: She was afraid to imagine that she could wake up again on a cold hospital bed in her former world, where she was only a sick shadow of herself. While Isabel was still lying in her hospital bed, exhausted by yet another coughing fit, someone coolly whispered to her that her weakness and illness were only the result of a sin committed once on the battlefield. Remembering the images of her father, family, and caring servants who surrounded her with warmth and care, the girl swore in the depths of her soul that she would become a strong, better version of herself, and would not ask for the slightest reward for her efforts. At that moment, the surrounding world began to blur before my eyes. Objects and images melted, as if dissolving in the fog, and everything around merged into one shapeless picture, as if consciousness was carried away somewhere into the distance. And finally, waking up from this half-sleep, Isabel was surprised to find herself sitting comfortably in someone's arms, feeling warmth and care that seemed to envelop her, returning her to a new reality. Isabel was surprised and stunned when she realized that the baby was being held in the arms of her father, the emperor himself. Ron, who seemed to be looking at her with his cold, piercing eyes, as if trying to grasp her inner feelings. The ruler's faithful assistant, standing behind the emperor's shoulder, addressed the princess with courtesy and concern, suggesting that she rest a little, since, in his opinion, after a long and eventful ceremony, she certainly needed to restore her strength. Suddenly, the little girl burst into tears. Large tears, one after another, flowed down her cheeks, and she sobbed loudly, frowning and making her cheeks even redder. All the sadness suddenly poured out, no longer finding shelter in the heart. The child's loud and drawn-out cry echoed throughout the palace, attracting the attention of everyone nearby, the girl lost in fleeting memories of the original plot. Clutching the man's clothes with her small fingers as tightly as she could, she tried her best to mumble through her childish sobs that he was hers, as if trying to convince herself of the truth of these words and find comfort in them. Watching as the ruler tried in vain to calm his daughter, Baitan, who was nearby and showed no signs of being alarmed, respectfully offered his help, realizing that perhaps a gentler approach would be able to pacify the girl. As soon as the young assistant took the baby in his arms, she instantly calmed down, stopped crying, and obediently settled on his shoulder, which caused the knight to smile sincerely, which he barely restrained, while Ron stood nearby. The emperor, with envy in his eyes, watched as his little daughter sat calmly and trustingly in the arms of his servant, as if she felt special care and protection next to him, which he himself, unfortunately, could not fully give her at that moment. Watching the emperor leave, Baitan bowed respectfully to him and promised that he would take the baby to her room so that she could rest a little after a long, eventful day and gain strength for future important meetings and affairs. Isabel could hardly contain her quiet laughter when she heard the words about how her father, without his usual smile, looked like a real monster. And even she herself could not help but agree with this funny description. It was strange and even disturbing to her to realize that such a good-natured and considerate person as Baitan actually had a dark side and was once a ruthless mercenary known in certain circles as the Shadow Sword. The man put the baby to bed with special care and tenderness, carefully holding her by the back of the head, as if wanting to give her peace and security in this moment, showing his sincere affection and attention. Charming Isabel, tired of all the events, fell asleep sweetly, closing her eyes under a warm and soft blanket that enveloped the girl of royal blood with warmth and comfort, as if protecting her from all worries and cares. Several months passed, and the little princess, with genuine joy, began to stretch her arms up to her mother, expecting warm and tender embraces that gave her a feeling of security and endless love. The empress, looking at her daughter with sincere admiration and happiness, could not believe that the little princess, already at such a young age, began to speak so confidently and consciously, pronouncing words with such sweet clarity. Almost every day, the mother and nanny discussed with admiration how smart and unusually capable their little girl was, assuring each other that the princess was truly a real genius, that at her age she was already showing intelligence and outstanding abilities. The maid proudly noted that even in the prestigious Magic Association, there were no such gifted spellcasters who could memorize and reproduce spells with such ease as the little princess managed to do. Smiling slyly, the little girl felt incredibly pleased and deliberately did not rush to reveal the secret of her genius, enjoying how her loved ones were surprised by her skills and successes, which seemed almost miraculous. Suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, the Empress froze in place, staring at her daughter in amazement, not believing her eyes and overcome with amazement at what the little girl was capable of, who clearly exceeded all expectations. Meanwhile, Isabel dropped to the floor and began doing push-ups as if playfully, demonstrating her strength and endurance with such concentration that she looked almost like a little warrior determined to show off her skills to those around her. Suddenly, the door swung open unexpectedly, and another man entered the room, asking the maid what made her so happy and radiant, and his interest was fueled by admiring glances. It was the emperor himself, still handsome and majestic, albeit in more modest clothing, which, despite its simplicity, remained luxurious and emphasized his high status. Isabel froze on the floor halfway through her push-up, shocked by the unexpected meeting with her father, whom she had not seen since the solemn ceremony. Her little heart sank with excitement and trepidation at his sudden appearance. The lady, frowning and looking sternly at her husband, asked whether it was not proper manners for him to knock first before entering, as if to emphasize that his sudden appearance had caused surprise. The man, turning away from his kind wife with restraint, silently and without unnecessary emotion, headed towards the exit, as if he had taken the beauty's remark into account, but not allowing himself to express either annoyance or a smile. Having closed the door behind him, the emperor knocked politely, as was proper, showing respect for her request and following an etiquette that seemed unnecessary to him, but nevertheless important for the peace of his wife. Chamois, smiling broadly and deciding to play along with her husband, asked cheerfully if her beloved had arrived, as if addressing him with a slight playfulness in order to soften the severity of their previous exchange. Ron entered the room again and, with a slight hint of irony in his male voice, noted that this time he knocked as she wanted, emphasizing with his menacing tone that he was ready to make concessions for her sake. Approaching her slightly embarrassed husband, Chamois greeted him tenderly, affectionately touching his hand. Rumors in the palace claimed that although the emperor was considered strict and even cold to his children. Meanwhile, the maid carefully picked up the baby in her arms, and without wasting any time, decided to put her to bed so that the little princess could rest a little, gain strength, and restore her energy after all the excitement. The first impression immediately came to mind when, upon seeing his daughter, Ron gave a stern look and said with distaste that the princess, in his opinion, was useless, which then hurt those around her and left a shadow on the relationship. However, Isabel decided to think positively and found an explanation for herself that perhaps her father simply missed her mother, and that is why, hearing her voice from the room, he could not resist and decided to come in to be near her for a while. Ron possessed strength that could compare to the main character's power and seemed to have no weakness except for one, his wife, to whom he was devoted and for whom he had deep respect and affection. It was the Empress, this quiet and loving woman, who eventually became his weak point and, it is said, the cause of his defeat, when his weakness for her clouded his resolve and exposed his vulnerability to his enemies. The world seemed to be empty after the tragic death of the country's ruler, leaving behind only emptiness and pain, and the emperor, feeling that he had lost his soulmate, fell to his knees and sobbed, not holding back either tears or despair. Weakened and having lost his former strength, he could no longer resist the protagonist, and soon the entire empire fell with him, as if fate was inextricably linked with their common fall and loss. At that moment, the little girl, feeling alone in the void, stood up on unsteady legs, firmly grasping the railings of her crib, finding in them support and strength to hold on, after which she loudly and desperately called out for her parents. The mother and father immediately turned their heads towards their little daughter, watching with interest and tenderness what the girl could be doing at such a late hour, and sincerely surprised by her cheerfulness and persistence. A light breeze entered the room, causing the curtains to sway and move in different directions as if dancing. The window remained slightly open, letting in the fresh night air, which filled the room with coolness and coziness. The golden color of the baby's eyes resembled the glow of the flowers standing nearby in a vase, and its warm hue seemed to reflect the love and light that burned in her little heart for those who were her whole world. Trying to convey her love to her parents, Isabel, a little haltingly, tried to express how much she loved them, putting into her words all the sincerity and warmth she could muster, and her gaze was full of genuine affection and trepidation. Suddenly, from surprise and delight, a loud cry of joy was heard in the house, because the little girl herself did not expect such words and feelings from herself. A sincere confession, carried by an echo, filled the hearts of everyone around with light and tenderness. Ron, without a moment's hesitation, quickly approached his daughter, his gaze stern and intense, and he firmly ordered her to repeat her words, as if trying to make sure of the sincerity of her confession. The princess, feeling a cold sweat run down her back from her father's intense gaze, embarrassedly muttered a new, even more incredible word, as if involuntarily revealing to him part of her deep feelings. Feeling both fear and shame, the girl lowered her head with noticeable embarrassment, as if trying to hide from the world and avoid the gaze of those around her, so that no one would guess about her anxiety and confusion. With a forced smile on her face, Isabel tried her best to look as sweet and friendly as possible, hoping that her parents would not be angry with her for what happened and would forgive her slight oversight. When the man was angry, he looked menacing, like a large and powerful panther, whose terrifying strength and grace inspired cold terror in everyone who was nearby and could feel the universal rage. The Empress seemed to intuitively understand all of her daughter's emotions, and affectionately, with a slight smile, noted that she was not at all angry with her, trying to calm the girl down and relieve her of unnecessary fears. Leaning towards the girl, the Empress confidentially shared a secret, saying that Ron may look so intimidating, but in reality, the handsome guy is not as scary as he might seem at first glance. After this, the lady turned to her husband and, in a reserved but persistent manner, remarked that he could have been honest with her from the very beginning and not tried to hide anything, because they trusted each other first and foremost. Ron was embarrassed by these words, and his cheeks flushed red despite the fact that the outwardly adult man remained stern and imperturbable, keeping a stony expression on his face, hiding his confusion. Isabel froze, feeling embarrassed and hesitant at her mother's words, who offered her to embrace her father. For her, it was unusual and difficult, because before she had not known such family warmth and closeness. Plucking up her courage and deciding to trust her mother's words, Isabel timidly raised her hands and asked if she could really hug her dad, as if afraid to violate the thin, almost imperceptible line between them. Fragmentary memories of a distant life surfaced in her mind when she watched a strange man holding a child's hand and carefully leading him for a walk. Such images were something elusively beautiful to her. Then, standing aside, Isabel could only dreamily watch this scene because her own life was spent in the shadow of a serious illness and great loneliness, like that of an infinitely lonely orphan. She lay on a cold metal bed in a hospital room, pressing her palm against the glass of the window, beyond which she could see a cloudy sky and heavy drops of rain, as if reflecting her own mood and loneliness. Despite her awkwardness and confusion, the girl still continued to hope that her dad would take her in his arms and hug her, as in those rare moments of warmth that she valued more than anything else in the world. Although Ron often repeated that the little princess would grow up overly attached, but he still couldn't resist. Carefully taking the baby in his arms, he lifted her into the air with tenderness, as if he was holding the most precious thing in his life. The father froze, holding his daughter tightly to himself, and the baby, finding herself in his arms, also froze in surprise. They both did not expect such unexpected closeness and warmth, as if they were truly seeing each other for the first time. The Empress could not contain her sincere laughter, illuminated by happiness, when this touching and tender scene, which she wanted to keep in her memory forever, appeared before the women's eyes. She approached her husband, smiling, and with a slight concern in her voice, began to explain how to properly hold such a young and fragile child in her arms so that she would be comfortable and safe, doing it with a gentleness and love that only strengthened the bond. The woman's hand gently and carefully touched her daughter's cheek, as if conveying all the warmth and care that she so wanted to give to her baby, hoping that this touch would leave a feeling of security and love in her heart. The Empress smiled broadly and said with pride that the sweet girl would certainly grow up incredibly strong, possessing not only courage but also gentleness, which the maiden saw in her large, clear eyes. The man's hand confidently and tightly embraced the child, supporting the little girl as if the whole world depended on this connection, as if this was how the guy expressed his unwavering protection and devotion. She finally realized what it was like to have real parents. Her long-time dream of feeling that very sincere love that she had so often thought about in her past life had finally come true. Once upon a time, her father abandoned her in early childhood, as if erasing her from his life, but now fate gave her this unexpected and priceless gift, parents who sincerely cared for her and protected her. Smiling happily, Isabel murmured softly that her lovely mother was certainly the best gift for her father, as if she believed that it was this important connection that filled them all with new meaning and warmth. In the hands of the emperor was an impressive gift box, decorated with a bright, festive bow, which sparkled and added an atmosphere of warmth and anticipation to the whole image, as if the gift contained something very important. Ron, a little embarrassed and trying to hide his emotions, turned away from his wife, muttering that he was just thinking, although it was clear from his look how much these moments with his family meant to him. Other hands gently touched the hands of the strong husband, touching the soft blanket under which their child lay, as if uniting the whole family into one whole, where everyone was dear and protected. With a soft smile, the wonderful lady remarked that she really enjoyed seeing this tender, caring side of her dear husband that he usually hid, and that such moments made her love for him even deeper. Isabel, nestled comfortably in her father's arms, could not help but notice how his heart began to beat faster, transmitting its rhythm through the fabric of his waistcoat. This sound, like the quiet ticking of a clock, filled the girl with peace and joy. Deciding that this moment was the best time to rest, the baby settled down even more comfortably and allowed herself to doze off in her dad's warm and reliable arms, where amazing silence and serenity reigned. Sitting in a soft chair, Ron leaned his elbow on the armrest, supporting his head with his hand, and watched his daughter with a warm smile, admiring the universal peace and beauty that filled the room with quiet charm. Evening came, and thick darkness fell outside the window, enveloping the majestic mansion in deep shadows, creating an atmosphere of mystery and comfort, as if the whole house was hiding in anticipation of something important. Clear, measured steps were heard. The sound of women's shoes echoed across the cold stone floor, as if awakening the walls of the old house and adding a special solemnity to the ensuing silence. Ron confidently walked forward along the long corridors of the majestic mansion, feeling a strange, warm excitement at the thought of his daughter, who so surprisingly reminded him of her mother, with her tenderness, bright smile. In his ancient family, there was no place for the weak, those who could not stand up for themselves and protect their name. Everyone was obliged to be able to hold a sword and, if necessary, fight for their honor and dignity. The man had deep doubts about whether there could be a person in their family who would not be able to take up a sword and bravely stand up for himself, because they valued strength and the ability to protect themselves and others above all else. The little girl, enthusiastically playing with a bright yellow bow, seemed to him completely unsuitable for the role of heir, because he did not see in her those qualities that he considered necessary for the future leader of their family. Tired, Ron covered his face with his hand and sighed heavily, as if trying to throw off the burden of accumulated worries and sudden tension that did not give him peace for a minute. Walking forward with quick, confident steps, the man understood that no matter how hard he tried, he would not be able to avoid his own fate, because it was an invisible thread guiding his every step, not allowing him to retreat or change direction. Byton, pronouncing each word with special solemnity and emphasizing each syllable, slowly called out to His Majesty, trying not only to attract his attention, but also to express with his whole appearance and voice deep respect. Standing in confusion and holding on to the doorway, the courtier, not without anxiety, asked the emperor what he wanted from him at such a late and unexpected hour, when the silence of the night had long since swallowed up the palace, and everyone who was in it was resting. Dodging the swift and heavy blows, the boy muttered in a low voice with a shudder that the owner could have not beaten him, because he believed that Ron is the personification of justice itself and true nobility. The emperor, clutching a glittering blade in his hand, coldly said that he had found evidence that a certain man had lied about his past work, and now he would have to answer for his words before the throne. Time seemed to fly by. And although the mansion still stood as majestic as ever, the princess was already 3 years old and began to show her first signs of character, which amazed everyone around her. The maid, with emphatic respect, informed her mistress that the empress would soon arrive to see her, and anticipating a ceremonial reception, she hastened to prepare everything necessary to ensure that the meeting would be truly impeccable. Isabel, dressed in an exquisite pink dress, stood at the window and happily watched the road, because very soon her dear mother, whose presence was especially dear to her, was supposed to arrive here. The little girl, running down a long corridor so fast that her tiny feet barely touched the floor, suddenly lost her balance, slipped, and losing control, fell, caught off guard by her own headlong rush. A graceful female hand carefully lifted a cup filled with hot aromatic tea, from which warm steam emanated, filling the room with a soft, soothing scent, as if enveloping those present in a cozy cloud. The woman, slightly raising her chin and turning a serious gaze on her interlocutor, warned that her first teacher was standing in front of them, so they should behave with respect and show decent behavior. Nearby, at the large dining table, among many adults, sat a little girl intently eating her portion, barely touching the food with that sweet caution that children show at such moments. Moliab, a wise and gray-haired mentor known for his strict but fair teaching style, was the one who spent years training young princes in the arts of ruling and life at court, passing on knowledge to them. Lord Byton was always the life of the party, because thanks to his sense of humor and ability to make funny faces, he invariably brought smiles and laughter to everyone who was around him. With ease, using his strength, the courtier carefully lifted the little princess into the air, and she, caught up in the surprise, soared like a bird, laughing and enjoying the moment, while a feeling of lightness enveloped her. Byton, showing his unfailing respect, bowed in a reserved and polite manner, greeting both the princess and her majestic mother, the empress, demonstrating how befitting a respectful servant at court. The lovely little girl suddenly jumped up from her chair and, unable to contain her joyful impulse, ran to meet her dear friend, anticipating a warm meeting and fun games with him. The hostess of the house, watching what was happening, looked at her daughter with a slight smile and a sparkle in her eyes, surprised and delighted by the little things around her, finding her reaction to what was happening incredibly sweet and touching. The woman, trusting the courtier and knowing his loyalty, with a gentle smile asked him to take care of the princess, entrusting him with this important mission so that her beloved daughter would feel safe and surrounded by care. Isabel, feeling excited and wanting to learn more, asked her friend with genuine interest what exactly prompted him to decide to become her mentor, as this decision certainly required a deep responsibility and commitment. The man, covering his face with his hands and drooping his shoulders, sighed with bitterness and pain in his voice, expressing his disappointment that the lady of his heart preferred another teacher and, it seemed, had much deeper feelings for him than for himself. Falling to his knees and hanging his head, the boy began to thrash about, loudly declaring that he was about to burst into tears, and his trembling voice and hands added drama to the scene, as if foreshadowing a storm of emotions. When Byton finally calmed down and the princess realized with surprise that his worries were only a clever pretense, Isabel flared up and loudly exclaimed that such a habit was terrible, since his actions were dishonest and unworthy. Isabel, plucking up her courage, confidently began to say that Lord Byton turned out to be a very bad person, since he constantly deceived her and pretended, hiding his true feelings, which destroyed any hope of trust between them. The little girl rushed forward with quick steps, urging her companion on with childish impatience and casting glances at him full of slight reproach, as if the lagging pace did not at all correspond to her playful mood and determination. With a sweet smile on her face and good-natured sincerity, the little girl declared that they should hurry, because she was destined to leave this world very soon, or rather at the age of 21, as if this was a simple statement of fact and not a tragic truth. Baitan, feeling a cold horror in his heart, asked with a confused voice who could be so cruel as to tell the young princess about the terrible seal of death on her body, thereby awakening fear in her and filling her soul with bitterness. At that moment, Baitan's face took on a frightening expression, as if he had turned into his dark side, a ruthless assassin, and his cold gaze suddenly began to resemble the unyielding cruelty that he usually tried so hard to hide. Isabel immediately screamed at the top of her voice, accusing Baitan of being a coward who used fear to subjugate other people, and her words were so harsh that they seemed to hurt more than any weapon. The servant froze with a tray in her hands, unable to move from shock. Her eyes widened in confusion, and she stood like a statue, not knowing how to behave in this difficult situation. Submissively, with his head down, the man knelt before his mistress, admitting his guilt and asking for forgiveness for his actions with sincere regret, as if hoping that this would help regain her trust. Then he went to the maid, who remained standing with the tray, and with the same humility and gentleness asked her forgiveness, hoping to ease her confusion and restore calm. A cup of hot tea was carefully placed on the table, from which a light smoke rose, spreading a pleasant aroma into the air, as if inviting everyone present to rest and reconciliation. Smiling tensely and not hiding his tension, Baitan asked his interlocutor, who was giving off a depressing aura, with persistent interest, who exactly had decided to tell her about the seal of death, clearly not intending to calm down until she knew the truth. The beautiful lady, trembling with fear, instantly froze in place and, barely moving her lips, babbled that she had heard her terrible prediction from the lips of the midwife who had been present at the birth. The girl explained with seriousness and sadness in her voice that she had known about her ominous fate since childhood, as she had always been considered useless and doomed, deprived of hope for the future. Looking down with a deep sadness in his eyes, Baitan muttered with sincere regret that the lady must have had to endure a lot of sadness, having to face such a prophecy from a young age, and his voice trembled with sympathy. The little beauty waved her hand in the negative, with sweet determination declaring that she was perfectly fine, and her slight smile testified to the fortitude she possessed despite the difficulties. Suddenly the courtier, showing a rare tenderness for him, affectionately took the princess by the hand, trying to convey to her his warmth and support, as if he wanted to show that she was not alone in this difficult fate. The guy squeezed both of the baby's hands tightly with his palms and said with a cheerful smile that now she had something soft and strange in her hands, like jelly, hinting at their trust and mutual support, turning the moment into a playful game. The training arena was literally filled with various weapons glittering in the dim light, creating an atmosphere where every sharp blade and shield seemed an integral part of the harsh but necessary training. The blades touched with a ringing sound, and like an echo of battle, an unspoken question hung in the air. Could such a good child, who was only 3 years old, already know about the existence of such a dark thing as death? Wiping the heavy sweat from his face, Ron was shocked and amazed that his little daughter already knew about such frightening topics, and her knowledge of scary things made him anxious and worried. Baitan stood straight, composed and calm, admitting that it was he himself who had decided to talk to the princess about such complex and dark issues, trying to explain to her the inevitable truths of life. The man's hand smoothly reached for the rag, carefully intending to wipe away the traces of dirt left on the surface, as if wanting to preserve its cleanliness and restore the lost shine that once adorned this object, creating the impression of true order. The princess always showed a keen interest in the world around her, running briskly through different corners of the palace and its environs, keeping in her memory the smallest details of what she saw, thanks to which her knowledge of the world expanded every day. Baitan was deeply hurt and outraged when he learned that the man who had spoken harshly to his daughter had called her useless without hesitation, and this had a painful impact on his heart because she was a precious light to him. The courtier shamelessly accused the princess of lack of emotion, noting that the little girl did not express any hint of sadness, but the girl only calmly replied that she was perfectly fine, and this confidence amazed him even more. Ron, lowering his head and sighing heavily, understood that no matter how hard Isabel tried, she still could not master the fighting technique that had been passed down from generation to generation in their ancient family for centuries, because this art required not only skill, but also an internal readiness to accept it. Byton was known for his straightforwardness, and so he stated decisively that he had not come here to interrogate the master, but only to emphasize that the princess, contrary to popular belief, was not at all useless. His fingers confidently and decisively gripped the hilt of the sword, as if drawing additional strength and readiness for the coming battle from this movement. Something in this gesture spoke of his firmness and devotion to the goal from which he could no longer retreat. The courtier managed to dodge the emperor's brutal blow at the last moment, barely dodging the deadly force put into this attack, and his heart beat so fast that it seemed he could hear the knock in the silence of the hall, realizing the full danger. Loudly and decisively, the boy shouted out that he was here now as a mentor, and not at all in the role of a warrior, hinting that his goal was to pass on knowledge and not to enter into battle, and this cry reflected all his confidence in the chosen position. As soon as the new blow sounded, Byton managed to deftly jump to the side, realizing that even the slightest hesitation could have been fatal for him, but his reaction was enough to preserve a chance in this dangerous fight. A satisfied and sly smile appeared on the guy's face, as if he had managed to sow a shadow of doubt in the soul of his master, and this slight smile showed his satisfaction that he had managed to shake the enemy's confidence even at the most tense moment. Ron, holding back the emotions that were bursting to come out, tightly clutched the fabric of his shirt with his hand and looked away so that no one would notice his disappointment, clearly trying to cope with the experiences that did not give him peace and deeply hurt him. Now the night teacher, showing persistence and patience, came to the princess every day with a book in his hands, trying to instill knowledge in her and teach her what he considered most important, finding in this a special goal and duty, which he tirelessly followed. Isabel, as always, greeted him with joy, waving her hand cheerfully and smiling at his every arrival, and the reflections of light shimmered softly on her airy, light dresses, giving her the appearance of a young and mischievous princess awaiting her mentor. One day, with a touching smile on her face, she handed him a drawing on which her childish, uncertain hand had drawn his portrait. The image of a man was visible on the sheet of paper, and this simple but sincere creation caused a warm wave of emotions in his soul. Byton, raising his eyebrows and widening his eyes in surprise, leaned forward a little, asking the girl who had given her such a stunningly beautiful painting, as if it were a true work of art worthy of admiration. The girl, beaming with pride, raised her nose, with a satisfied smile announcing that she herself had painted this portrait, putting all her soul and skill into it in order to surprise everyone around her with her unusual work. Having learned that it was the girl who was the author of the drawing, the kind Byton was so amazed that he involuntarily opened his mouth in amazement, unable to hide how amazed he was by the talent of his small but smart mistress. The guy couldn't stop admiring her skill, amazed by how his mistress showed incredible talent and great inspiration in almost everything the beauty took on. Isabel recoiled in fear as she heard talk of evil spirits and people who could cure the obsession that befell even the most noble holy knights, renowned for their strength and valor. Fragments of memories suddenly flashed through her mind, of Byton standing on the dark side, his eyes bright green through the shadows of his mercenary mask, as if he were connected to the very sinister forces she had been warned against. The man sensed the princess's anxiety and fear, so he quickly reassured her, gently assuring her that they always had holy knights who could protect the princess from any evil, and that she had absolutely nothing to worry about. The guy, kneeling down next to the girl, smiled warmly and gently assured her that if she wanted, he would gladly ask the head of the knights, the fighters against evil spirits, to spare her a minute of his precious time to tell her about all the secrets of the service. The lovely girl laughed awkwardly, as if from embarrassment or shyness, and her ringing laughter sounded a little hesitant, as if the smart little girl was trying to hide her own emotions. Sweet Isabel was fond of drawing in her past life when she spent long hours in a hospital ward, finding in this activity the comfort and peace that such a young heart needed so much. Byton, with a thoughtful expression on his face, caught his mistress's words and frowned slightly. After all, she said that she had been drawing when she was very young, although even now she was still very young in age. Fearing that her innocent lie was about to be revealed, the little girl quickly jumped to her feet, trying her best to come up with some plausible excuse so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion and keep her secret. However, unexpectedly for everyone, Byton bowed his head and, slowly choosing his words, said that he understood perfectly well what the lady was talking about because her words and feelings seemed close to him, as if they had been familiar for a long time. His gaze, reflecting the depth of his thought, was directed downwards, and his green eyes looked with some sadness through the white strands of hair that fell softly on his face, giving his appearance a calm thoughtfulness and a subtle sadness. He was truly sorry to realize that such a young princess was already thinking about being an adult, and perhaps felt a burden of responsibility that she herself was not yet ready to cope with. When the man, feeling a sudden pain in his heart for his mistress, fell heavily onto the sofa, Isabel immediately jumped up from her seat, looked at him anxiously, and then, without wasting a second, ran towards the mentor, hoping for his help and support in this strange situation. Byton himself, as if not feeling any discomfort, just smiled softly and remained lying motionless on the sofa, as if everything happening around him did not bother him at all, and he calmly watched the reactions of those around him. Feeling the ominous, gloomy aura emanating from her mentor, the little girl suddenly began to wave her hands frantically, trying to distract attention from the tense atmosphere, and suggested that her interlocutor play something fun to diffuse the situation and get rid of the tension she felt. Ron sat looking intently at the papers that were being shoved almost under his nose so that he could better examine all the details, although his gaze remained cold and focused, as if he did not feel much interest in what was happening. On the opposite side stood Byton, proudly speaking of the princess's achievements in creating abstract paintings and works of art, which he believed were deeply meaningful and worthy of respect, especially for someone so young. However, Ron did not share the enthusiasm, and after a quick glance at the children's drawings, dryly declared that he saw neither beauty nor skill in them, but only simple scribbles that did not deserve attention and did not represent anything other than ordinary garbage. Throwing his head back with a slight grin, the boy confidently declared that the strange picture they were standing in front of was not painted by him at all, but by a 3-year-old child, as if justifying the visible unevenness and childish features. Then, with enthusiasm, he began to describe with admiration another portrait, which depicted a handsome young man with captivating golden eyes and coal-black hair, giving him a regal appeal that even remotely resembled the emperor. Sitting in a chair, Ron noticed with a subtle smile that the courtier, who had just a moment ago called the portrait an abstraction, was now contradicting himself, speaking of its details with obvious admiration, which caused Ron quiet bewilderment and light mockery. The courtier seemed not to notice the reaction. Ron carefully placed his finger on the painted eyes, comparing them to his master's appearance, as if finding features in this portrait that resembled the one he had faithfully served. But before he could finish speaking, something suddenly whistled through the air, flew very close to his face, almost touching him, and pierced the wall with force, causing those present to tense up and look around warily to understand where the threat was coming from. Byton, with a frightened cry, immediately began to talk about how his clothes were very expensive, and he did not expect that someone could so thoughtlessly put them at risk, as if this object, stuck into the wall, encroached on his personal property. Ron sighed wearily, clearly tired of Byton's concern, and ordered his interlocutor to stop talking and leave, not wanting to waste any more time on discussions that seemed empty and meaningless to him. Meanwhile, the emperor, noticing the commotion and realizing that the drawing in question belonged to his daughter, froze in surprise, realizing that this work had been created by the lady herself, and his face reflected a mixture of pride and unexpected recognition of her talent. The little angel-like child sat intently drawing with crayons on a piece of paper, her tiny fingers carefully tracing the features of a man who looked very much like her father, as if nature itself had inspired her to create this image. The emperor, seeing such a touching gesture from his daughter, was struck to the depths of his soul and even opened his mouth from unexpected, but such sincere admiration, as if simple childish art could melt the most secret corners of his heart. However, when the courtier, excited, uttered a few words about the power of family love, the ruler froze for a moment. His hand seemed to freeze in indecision, and, trembling slightly, clenched into a fist, as if this phrase reminded him of something personal. Turning away from the courtier with a look of doubt on his face, Ron asked in a reserved tone what he had just said, unwilling to accept the idea that the little girl could feel real, genuine love for her father. At this time, Byton, as if overwhelmed by a sudden wave of jealousy, thought bitterly about how much he wished the princess would love him with the same purity and warmth as the little girl loved her father. The knight once threatened the chef that he could forget about his generous salary if he did not cook the capricious princess's favorite dishes, but instead of gratitude, the young lady only looked at him sullenly and reproached him for his displeasure. Suddenly, a heavy male hand slammed loudly on the table, interrupting the conversation in its midst and causing everyone to flinch from the sudden sound, which was like a bolt from the blue, instantly drawing attention to the stern face of the owner of the hand. Ron, finally unable to bear the empty chatter, ordered everyone present in a stern voice to speak only to the point, not allowing meaningless phrases and idle reasoning, showing himself to be a decisive and fair ruler. Byton finally got to the point of the conversation, noting that the princess had a clear and rare talent for magical engineering, which opened up incredible possibilities for her and made her a true heir to the great masters of this art. Ron was so amazed by what he heard that he involuntarily repeated the words of the courtier, and his eyes widened in surprise, and his mouth remained slightly open, as if he could not believe in such unexpected abilities of the princess. Byton, placing his hand on his heart, assured everyone with the utmost respect that he was speaking only the pure truth, and asked the master to listen to his words, since they concerned the very future of the kingdom and the important role of the princess, who had not yet realized her gift. The girl froze in place when a completely new, unfamiliar person appeared before her, who joyfully and excitedly expressed the honor of meeting a royal person, emphasizing his sincere admiration and respect for her status and capabilities. In front of her stood a truly beautiful girl with long, dark hair. It was Karen, the princess's mentor, and a respected member of the Association of Magicians, who was supposed to not only teach her, but also guide her on the path to revealing her magical talent. Moreover, it was she, Karen, who turned out to be the main villain of the novel, cleverly hiding her true intentions under the mask of politeness and external charm, which gave her image even more mystery and threat, promising unexpected turns. The hall was richly furnished. Luxurious chairs with elegant carvings were placed everywhere. The walls were decorated with expensive furniture, works of art and tapestries, which emphasized the grandeur and status of the royal palace. Standing next to his master's desk, Byton respectfully offered to find the princess an experienced mentor who could unlock her innate magical abilities so that she could become an even more worthy heir to the kingdom. Ron reminded that the use of magic was strictly prohibited in the palace, and no one, not even the princess, could break this important rule, established to maintain order and safety among the courtiers. In magical engineering, there were 3 types of magic, and engineering itself was a science that was used to solve problems and complex issues by combining magical knowledge and technical skills to achieve maximum efficiency and benefit. The princess could sense mana from infancy. This amazing gift was confirmed long ago, and everyone knew that she had special talents that made her truly exceptional among other members of the royal family. Placing his hand on the table for emphasis, he added that the princess was also capable of creating complex designs and magic circles, indicating her innate ability in magical engineering and a willingness to learn the necessary science. Holding up the child's drawing, Byton smiled and noted that the princess was observant for her age, capturing details in her drawing that would normally escape a child's eyes, indicating a well-developed imagination. Byton listened attentively as the princess enthusiastically explained the concept of numbers to him, demonstrating her intelligence and using her fingers to make everything clear and visual, which made him greatly admire her abilities. Covering his mouth with his hand, the knight noted with a soft smile that the little girl had amazing accuracy and could accurately calculate the number of servings of jelly, as if predicting how much would be needed for everyone present. Ron thought about the courtier's words, leaning back slightly in his chair and immersing himself in thoughts about the princess's future, trying to comprehend everything that was said and make a decision that could determine the further path of training. A satisfied smile appeared on the assistant's lips because he had managed to interest the gentleman with his proposals and thoughts, and he felt that he had been able to influence his opinion, which in itself was a small victory for him. 3 months passed, and in the room of the mansion, furnished with special luxury and elegance, a soft light reigned, which penetrated through the high windows, creating an atmosphere of comfort and harmony, where every element of the interior emphasized the taste and status of its owners. Near the window there was a tray with a variety of exquisite sweets, and fresh desserts were also served, which looked so appetizing that it seemed that they were created especially to decorate this bright day. But Isabel was deeply depressed and distressed as never before. Her eyes were dull and tired, as if all her strength had left her, and her thoughts were filled with heavy reflections, and nothing of the surrounding splendor could console her. Karen sat next to him, calmly finishing her cup of tea, elegant, like a true aristocrat who knew how to behave in society and always maintained dignity, even in the most difficult situations. Noticing that the princess did not look as usual, the lady froze and asked her how she was feeling with concern, showing genuine interest and support, which testified to the deep respect and friendship between them. Hearing that everything was fine, the lady carefully placed the cup on the table. In her story, she was depicted as an ambitious sorceress striving for knowledge and power, which gave her image a certain mystery. Karen, realizing that the princess needed support, promised that she was always ready to help and answer any questions or difficulties that arose. She herself was not only a smart sorceress, but also a strong personality. Having betrayed her teacher, the lady sat on his throne in his place and thus became the head of an association that had once been founded on the ideals of cooperation and wisdom, but was now under her tight control. Isabel privately thought that Karen was a true psychopath, capable of betrayal and even murder if necessary to achieve her goals. Such ruthless ambition inspired fear and respect at the same time. Wanting to conquer the entire empire and become the mistress of the continent, the maiden meets the main character in the story, a handsome knight who seemed to be the opposite of dark plans, and their destinies intersect in the most unexpected turn of events. Having betrayed her teacher, the lady confidently sat upon his throne, taking his place, and thus became the head of an association that had once been founded on high ideals of cooperation and wisdom. Now it was under her tight control. Isabel privately reflected that Karen was a true psychopath, capable of betrayal and even murder if it was necessary to achieve her ambitious goals. Such ruthless determination inspired fear and respect. Wanting to conquer the entire empire and become the undisputed mistress of the continent, the maiden encounters the main character in the story, a handsome knight who seemed to be the complete opposite of her dark plans. Reading the novella, comfortably settled on a bed in the clinic, Isabel was shocked by such an unexpected ending, which turned her understanding of the plot and characters upside down. After all, it soon became clear that the beautiful lady in question was a true descendant of dragons, majestic creatures that enjoyed special honor and respect in the magical world, possessing strength and wisdom inaccessible to ordinary people. These majestic creatures were considered sacred in the world of magic, and were the only ones who could remove the seal of death from themselves, which made them even more powerful and mysterious, leaving a mark on the hearts of all who knew their legends. And so the usual cheap curse did not work on her, and the villainess's insidious plan failed, because the heiress of the dragons had protection that many did not even suspect. Ultimately, the heroine decided to capture her memories on the pages of a book and continue her life with the protagonist, amazing him with her magical abilities, which only grew stronger every day. Karen sat silently and concentrated, her hands folded in front of her, lost in her thoughts and reflections on what awaited her in the future, when her life would change forever. The princess, sitting opposite, smiled sweetly, thinking about the fate of the woman opposite, who, as it seemed to her, would hardly be able to defeat the hero of the novel, because there were still 18 years left before the beginning of their story. Once again, Isabel, feeling awkward, replied that she felt fine, and it was strange that the villain had confronted her, since she never thought she would find herself in a situation where her strength would be the subject of discussion. Karen quickly realized that the main character in her story was different from the other characters in that she was insightful and had the ability to see deeper than what appeared at first glance, which made her especially unique. The mere thought that this lady might reveal her secret made Isabel feel a sharp pain in her stomach, caused by excitement and nervousness, as if all her experiences were intertwined into a single lump of anxiety. Isabel's hand rose up, and her beautiful long fingers seemed to be trying to touch the sky, reflecting all the hidden inner experiences and the desire to escape from the growing tension in her fragile soul. As the teacher stood up and walked towards the teacher's desk, the little girl interrupted her, declaring that she would like to study instead with the Lord, her father's assistant. Straightening up, the lady coldly asked if the princess really didn't want to study with her, looking in bewilderment at the small but determined student who clearly wasn't going to give up without a fight. Realizing that this was the only way to save her life, Isabel fell to the floor and threw a tantrum, screaming loudly about wanting to learn from another person, indifferently ignoring those around her. The lady recoiled in shock as the girl rolled her eyes, began to knead the floor with her hands and desperately pronounced the courtier's name, as if she hoped that this would help her change the situation and draw attention to her request. The maid carrying the sheets started at the loud words coming from the next door, and her heart began to beat faster in surprise, forcing her to stop and listen to what was happening. The sorceress's eyes, sparkling like silver, were cold. A mysterious fire burned in their depths, and her face had an emotionless yet attentive expression, as if she was a witness to many secrets that she kept within herself. A plan appeared in the little girl's head, like a spark that flared up, in which she decided that it was necessary to torture the main character of the novel so that he would finally wake up and be able to defeat the insidious villainess who threatened everyone. There were many questions surrounding whether Aaron would become emperor and whether he would end up fighting against the Zodiac, which is a complex combination of strength and cunning that threatens their world. The little girl froze on the floor with her hands raised, absorbed in thoughts that seemed to circle around her, creating an atmosphere of complete silent concentration and obscurity. In the original, there were two strong men, the brave and magnificent Aaron and Isabel's father, who was greatly weakened after the loss of his beloved wife, leaving him alone and deeply sad. However, if dear Isabel tries, she will be able to save her mother, and she will not fade like fragile blue flowers, which means that Aaron will not weaken, maintaining his strength and fortitude in this difficult world. There was still enough time, and moreover, in 18 years the girl would not care, because that was when she would have to leave this cruel but beautiful world forever. However, sobbing from bewilderment and worry, the woman was sincerely worried about the baby, feeling how anxiety was born in her heart for her fate and well-being, because the adversity they encountered could leave a deep mark. Moreover, the father, showing all his care and love, held his daughter in his arms, gently stroking her head, as if he wanted to surround her with warmth and support so that she would feel safe even in the most difficult times. With a heavy sigh, Karen began to talk about how, if this situation continued, then studying between them would become a real test and a difficult task, requiring incredible effort and concentration to achieve any results. Strictly and with clear confidence, she explained to the princess that magic is a complex science that requires a special connection and mutual understanding between teacher and student. Otherwise, success in this field will be unattainable and will remain only a dream. Having decided to change her anger to mercy, the princess smiled softly at the sorceress and said with sincere delight that she liked the lady very much, and this was an unexpected but pleasant change in their relationship, opening up new prospects for cooperation. Isabel decided for herself that she would protect her family at any cost, and, realizing the importance of this task, she tried to keep her emotions under control so as not to succumb to panic and fear in difficult moments. In a team that was luxuriously decorated and filled with magic, a promise was made that Isabel would study diligently with the sorceress, striving to develop her abilities and master the mysteries of magic that would open up new horizons for her. Today, Karen walked calmly down the large corridor, dressed in a bright red dress that emphasized her grace and confidence, attracting the attention of those around her with its magnificence. Before entering, the lady announced to the student in a determined voice that she was about to enter the room, emphasizing the importance of her intention and her readiness for new beginnings. When she entered, she was startled by the loud sound, as Isabel immediately closed the door behind her, slamming it loudly, which was an unexpected and expressive gesture, adding additional tension to the situation. Putting her finger to her lips, the little girl, with a mischievous smile on her face, whispered to the witch that she would behave quietly, so as not to disturb the magical atmosphere that reigned around them, and so as not to be distracted from her important affairs. Meanwhile, when no one was watching, the princess carefully held out a heart-shaped candy towards her mentor, hoping that this sweet gift would make her smile and improve her mood. Kneeling down, Karen felt a thrill as she was presented with a dessert with a wonderful peach flavor and delicate jelly, which made her heart fill with joy and delight at such an unexpected treat. With a wide smile on her face, the little girl exclaimed that the lady had accepted this delightful gift with gratitude and, without hesitation, sent it for testing, eagerly awaiting the emotions it would evoke. Embarrassed, Karen pulled back, clutching the book tighter to her, as if seeking comfort and protection from unwanted attention, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Coughing into her fist, the woman muttered that the lesson had already begun, and therefore she could not afford to leave the class until their training was completed, because the responsibility for the learning process lay with her, and she had to do her best. The villainess, being completely unaware that all her actions were part of a carefully thought-out, insidious plan of the student, who, like a true strategist, carefully watched her every step, hoping to ultimately win the favor of this mysterious lady. Raising her hand up, the little girl, tirelessly, did not stop asking more and more questions, while demonstrating amazing diligence and sincere interest in what was happening around her. The unfortunate girl was bombarded with all sorts of questions about her age, where she came from, her food preferences, and many other topics completely unrelated to her studies, making her feel like the center of attention. Putting her pen on the table, Karina calmly replied that she would be 22 next year, and she did so with such composure as if this fact was important to her for more than just her age. Tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, the lady continued to talk about how in her village she was named after a beautiful flower and how her study of magic had begun since she was only 7 years old when she first met her mentor. A few days passed, and the greenhouse was filled with true beauty. The scarlet roses blooming in the gardens filled the air with a sweet scent, creating an atmosphere of magic and tranquility. Sitting on the bench next to the teacher, Isabel answered the questions carefully, aware that she was already familiar with the seal of death, which gave her voice a note of anxiety and wisdom. Karina later intended to use this evil spell to destroy the protagonist, fully aware of the seriousness of her intention and the consequences it could entail. Holding the book in her hands, the lady persistently asked the princess what exactly she knew about the cursed seal, arousing a keen interest in the mysterious pages and the dark secrets hidden within their contents. After that, their conversation turned to discussing how such a young girl had already managed to learn about such a concept as death, which was striking in its contrast to her carefree age and playful nature. Isabel, looking sheepishly at her mentor, muttered that she nevertheless considered her life a real gift that was worth appreciating, even despite all the difficulties and dangers that might be encountered along the way. Smiling, the little girl admitted that she is not afraid of the end of her life and is happy to spend every minute believing that she is living to the fullest, enjoying every moment and discovery that life brings her. Squeezing her hands and playing with her fingers, the girl narrowed her eyes, feeling a thrill that was unbearably strong, because she was worried about how sad the people close to her would be after Isabel's death, and this feeling pressed on her heart like a heavy burden. Pointing her finger at herself, she stated that she did not want anyone to be sad because of her presence, because in her soul there was only hope that those around her could find joy and light even in the darkest moments, and this thought warmed her like a ray of sunshine. The water flowing from the fountain filled the space with a gentle sound, creating an atmosphere of silence that enveloped everyone present, as if wrapping them in a soft, cozy blanket, giving everything that was happening a special magic and peace. However, Isabel froze as she turned her head towards the curly-haired girl, shocked to realize that her world had been turned upside down, and that this moment had become like a slow-motion film for her, where each moment seemed to drag on forever. The villain of the novel, despite her outward cold-bloodedness, could not hold back the tears that shamelessly flowed down her cheeks, although her face remained absolutely impassive, like a mask hiding her true feelings. Frozen in horror, Isabel couldn't understand why the curly-haired girl was upset, and wondered if she was the cause of those tears, because such a sorrowful display of feelings shocked her, as if the world around her suddenly ceased to exist. Karen quickly turned away, trying to hide her emotions, and at that moment quietly asked the little girl not to worry about such trifles, giving her voice confidence, although real waves of despair and confusion were raging inside her. However, Isabel immediately realized that all this was just theater and a game of a cunning sorceress who manipulated the feelings of those around her, and her own heart was filled with anxiety from the realization of this insidious truth. However, deciding to play along, the little girl extended her arms forward, trying to calm her mentor, radiating warmth and support, as if she herself was a source of light in this dark moment. Clutching her hand on the bench, the woman whispered to the princess not to speak of death, for it was such a terrible deception, and words spoken at that moment could destroy the fragile world they were trying to create around themselves. The gardens were magnificent, and among the greenery red roses bloomed like symbols of hope, filling the space with a sweet scent and bright colors that seemed to be able to soothe any sadness. Karen turned back to face the little lady and asked her to allow them to go through this difficult and scary time together, being close, like two flowers supporting each other in a storm, full of hope. When asked if this was true, Karen nodded, confirming her words with a slight confidence that enveloped her like a warm veil. Suddenly, little Isabel jumped up from her seat and rushed to embrace the beautiful and charming witch, filled with joy and admiration, and at that moment her cute hat flew off her head. The girl hugged her mentor affectionately, saying with warmth in her voice that she wanted to be with her and continue to study magic, because her heart was filled with gratitude for all the knowledge and support that she received from this wise woman. Isabel thought to herself that she would not succumb to the cunning deception, trying not to reveal her emotions, remaining hidden from the mentor's gaze, because deep down her heart was beating the alarm, warning of a possible trap. Having taken revenge on her offenders, Karen took the leading position in the association, but life no longer seemed completely smooth for her, because each new trial brought its own difficulties and tested her resilience, forcing her to look for new paths to success. Among the many followers of the former teacher, there were many who did not trust Karen and considered her unworthy of such a high title, refusing to recognize the lady's power, which created an atmosphere of mistrust and doubt around her. The girl realized that in order to earn authority, she would have to make a revolution that would change the existing order of things, and only then could the association recognize her as the head, opening up new opportunities and power for her. At this time, the girl had only one way out, and that was the path to war, where swords rose up, sparkling against the scarlet glow of the sky, like symbols of determination and struggle. The members of the association began to acknowledge the new mistress as she, with the help of stunning magic, began to conquer new territories, demonstrating her strength and confidence, and with each new success, a spark lit up in her eyes. However, all the sorceress's plans collapsed, and she plunged into the abyss of despair, feeling how she lacked freedom, and the chains that bound her became unbearable, like invisible shackles that were tightening more and more with each passing day. She was suddenly brought out of her thoughts by the voice of a wary teacher who asked whether the educational material was clear, leaving the children waiting for an answer and hoping that they would pay attention to the lesson. Without really paying attention to what the teacher was saying, the little student quickly demonstrated her answer by giving a thumbs up and proudly said that everything was clear, hoping that her confidence would impress those around her. With a loud bang, the book was closed, and it was time to move on to more serious topics of magic, which created an atmosphere of anticipation and excitement in the classroom, where everyone was ready for new discoveries and mysteries. Karen, sitting at the table and observing the students, noticed that the conditions in which they grew up were very different from her own, and therefore they could slowly start with the very basics of magic without rushing to delve into its subtleties and secrets. Closing her eyes, the villainess added that magic may seem frightening, but it is only a game of perception, and in fact, it can open doors to incredible opportunities and amazing discoveries. Several months passed, and the yellow flowers blossomed in all their glory, filling the space around with bright colors and joyful aromas that created an atmosphere of spring awakening. Raising her hand up, Karen gave the command to sense the presence of mana, as if reminding the students of the importance of connecting with the source of their magical powers and their ability to control that energy. Pointing to a stone that lay on the table, Karen commanded the student to focus on it and put her magic into it, giving her the opportunity to test her powers and expand the boundaries of her capabilities in the magical arts. The princess, thoughtfully touching her finger to her lips, was lost in thought about how much time had passed since she dreamed of creating a flow of magical energy that would allow her to control stones with ease and grace. The servants in the mansion, which was filled with the sounds of household chores, were amazed to learn that the young mistress had decided to study magic and began to practice secret arts that were previously inaccessible to mere mortals. With a decisive slam of her fists on the table, the princess made a firm decision to study everything possible in the field of magic, leaving behind all doubts and fears, ready to plunge into a world of wonders and incredible discoveries. She cast a spell and, concentrating, created a seal, after which the stone located on the table shone with a blinding light, filling the room with a magical atmosphere. Karen was clearly amazed by the amazing events that unfolded before her eyes, not believing her eyes and wondering how this was possible in real life. What was glowing in the girl's palm turned out to be a mana barrier with a powerful spell that could not only protect, but also grant her power that she never even dared to dream of. Not understanding the true power that was hidden within it, Isabel lifted the object up, admiring how wonderful and beautiful the stone was, sparkling in the rays of light like a star that had fallen from the sky. Moreover, the color of the barrier did not just shine. It shimmered with as many as 5 different shades, creating an amazing spectacle that captivated with its magic and sorcery. Karen witnessed such a miracle for the first time in real life, having previously only read about such magical powers in books and dreamed of one day seeing them with her own eyes. Meanwhile, the stone, as if gaining its own will, rose into the air, and golden streams of energy enveloped the entire room, filling it with an atmosphere of magic and mystery. The lady persistently asked her student to practice moving the stone in space, emphasizing the importance of this activity for her magical development and skills. However, suddenly the object fell onto the table with a dull thud and rolled away, and the magic that seemed eternal suddenly disappeared, leaving the princess clearly tired and disappointed. However, Isabel, with a wide and sincere smile on her face, continued to stand and enjoy what was happening, because this lesson was much more exciting and enjoyable than the boring lectures that she had to attend before. Jumping up with joy, the little girl asked her teacher with genuine delight if they could repeat this exciting activity again, or perhaps do something similar that would bring them the same joy and fun. However, after a long and painful silence, Karen finally found her voice. And as if breaking out of the stifling darkness, she immediately said a decisive no, demonstrating all her confidence and steadfastness. Her fist clenched tightly, and her fingers tensed like the strings of an instrument ready for action, expressing absolutely all the suppressed emotions and inner experiences that overwhelmed her. The table in front of them was almost broken, and in the girl's open palm a magic seal was burning brightly, emitting a magical light and foreshadowing important events that they did not even suspect. The princess's mana level was so high that if the teacher had not used absorption magic, the consequences could have been simply dire, and no one could have predicted how it would have ended for all of them. Thus, it was impossible to deny that Isabel was destined to become a sorceress, because from childhood she had hidden within her a special gift that would undoubtedly one day manifest itself in all its power and beauty. The stone, unfortunately, could not withstand the stress and eventually broke in half, which testified to its fragility and unpreparedness to withstand even the smallest tests. The princess herself was immensely pleased with the praise from her mentor, who noted that she was doing an excellent job with all the tasks, and was demonstrating more and more outstanding abilities every day. Sliding across the table and leaning back, Isabel said she would be happy if she were invited to participate in various events more often, because she missed communication and friendly support. Taking the book in her hands and loudly knocking on the table, Karen said in a cold voice that this glow only comes from the princess herself, thereby emphasizing the uniqueness of her magic and ability. Raising her hand up, the little girl asked if magicians could fly, and having received consent in response, she felt a sincere interest and admiration for the magical world flare up inside her. The girl screamed in fear when she learned that it was so easy to fall and die, and at that moment it became clear to her how dangerous and unpredictable magic could be. When Karen left the room, the girl could no longer contain her emotions, and tired, sank to the floor, breathing heavily, as if trying to free herself from the growing tension that had not left her since she had encountered the sinister intentions. In the eyes of the little girl, Karen appeared as an evil witch, threateningly uttering insidious phrases that made the girl's heart clench in fear, reminding her that even the most harmless words can hide real dangers behind them. The bright light coming through the window of the old mansion created a contrast with the gloomy atmosphere enveloping the room and reminded that life goes on outside these walls, despite the internal torment. Karen stood next to the doors, leaning against them, with her hands folded behind her back, which gave her the appearance of a confident and powerful figure, as if she was ready to push away everything that was bothering her at any moment. The lady began to cast a spell, calling for silence and darkness. The curtains began to flutter in a light breeze, as if responding to her call and giving the room an even more mysterious and enigmatic appearance. The tired beauty, realizing the full gravity of what had happened, lay down on the bed and, closing her eyes, tried to fall asleep, which seemed to her the only salvation from a reality full of fear and uncertainty. Clutching the human-shaped toys in her hands, the girl couldn't help but squeal as she reminisced about how sweet and charming the princess was when she first came into her life, leaving an unforgettable mark on her heart. She began to quickly roll over the entire bed, unable to understand how one could be such a charming girl, because it seemed unbearably strange and unusual to her, like a fairy tale that had come to life right before her eyes. Only after knocking the insides out of the toy so that the cotton wool flew out of it, the girl was able to regain her composure and finally calm down, sitting on the bed with a straight back, as if this helped her collect her thoughts and analyze what was happening. Now it became clear why Byton turned a blind eye to all his mistakes and misunderstandings, trying to avoid facing a reality that seemed to weigh him down with its weight and left no room for hope. Karen herself, realizing that her talent at a young age was oppressive and became a heavy burden, felt how this burden was pressing on her shoulders, depriving her of the joy and free choice in the life that she so wanted to live. She awkwardly feigned playfulness, adjusting the hem of her dress, while the boy in front of her, disappointed by her answer, regretfully announced that he did not want to date her anymore, as if her refusal had been an insurmountable blow to him. He pushed the beauty aside with his hand, not believing that anyone would dare to refuse him, and his face reflected anger and bewilderment, as if all his confidence had crumbled to dust from a simple word. Karen had a difficult childhood. She was constantly shaking from cold and hunger, experiencing constant fear that enveloped her tightly, like an invisible shadow, not allowing her to forget about her suffering. Her parents left her in an orphanage, and the strict rules made it difficult to adapt there. A man's hand squeezed her baby hair, making her feel defenseless and vulnerable. Only by using magic was the girl able to push away her offenders, gaining the confidence and strength that she had been searching for in herself for so long, as if this magical ability had become her protection from everything evil and unfair in the world around her. The teachers also did not like the little girl, claiming that she was becoming guilty herself, since she attracted trouble to herself and behaved badly, as if this was her only calling in this cruel world. They were all hypocrites who hid behind masks of virtue, concealing their true essence, and Karen acutely felt this hypocritical atmosphere that surrounded her, making her doubt herself. Because the teachers didn't like the noise, Karen had to endure the bullying, unable to resist and hiding behind her helplessness, as if it was the only way to protect her heart from pain. However, one day, a handsome mage came to the shelter with a hat in his hand and a smile that shone so brightly that Karen felt how he really wanted to take her under his care, as if a spark of hope ignited in her soul. That day, Karen felt hope for the first time, standing in front of him with her teacher, confident that she would finally be taken away from this terrible place where she had suffered and humiliated for so long. The wizard, appearing before her, extended his hand and, with a kind smile, invited her to go away with him, as if he were her savior who had come at the most difficult moment. Tears of joy ran down her cheeks, and the girl finally realized that all this time she had not been okay, that her inner world had been full of fears, but now she could hope for the best and believe in her future. The man who took Karen from the orphanage turned out to be William, the head of the Mages Association, a powerful sorcerer dressed in white robes that looked like they were made of purest and light. But even with such a kind person at first glance, the girl's nightmares did not end, and she quickly realized that behind his kind smile, there was something much darker and more dangerous than she could have imagined. The man everyone thought was an angel turned out to be a two-faced madman wearing a mask of virtue, and his true nature was slowly but surely revealed before her eyes like a sinister painting depicting horrors. He was a disgusting monster in a human body, and he always whispered in his daughter's ear that she should smile, making her feel like a doll, obedient to someone else's will, as if she had no right to her own feelings and desires. However, one day she got tired of being a puppet, and Karen decided to become stronger in order to take revenge on her tormentor, realizing that there was no room left in her heart for hatred, only a cold determination to move forward. Then, as she immersed herself in her studies, she found that the amount of training increased even more, and every moment spent in the pursuit of knowledge and strength brought her closer to the goal she had set for herself. Soon the young maiden achieved high mastery in magic, which brought her well-deserved respect and honor among her peers, and also attracted the attention of powerful magicians and nobles who saw potential in her. 2 years ago, she learned that a magic teacher was looking for a student to teach the princess, and it would be a real sin not to take advantage of such an amazing chance that could change her life and destiny. A child with a death mark given to her by fate decided to help her new acquaintance in studying this cursed seal, as well as in taking revenge on her cruel teacher, who had hurt her more than once. However, all her plans for revenge and the conquest of magical power changed after an unexpected meeting with a sweet and kind princess, who asked many questions to her mentor, sincerely interested in everything around her. Karen's heart could not help but flutter and change after meeting this kind girl who radiated warmth and light, filling her soul with joy and hope for a better future. She was incredibly happy with the gift of a jelly heart, because no one had ever given her anything like this before, and it became for her a symbol of friendship and support that she had longed for. Kneeling down, the lady accepted the gift with gratitude, as Isabel was sharing something truly valuable and sincere with her, which strengthened their bond and helped Karen feel needed and loved. The princess spoke so sincerely that she considered the meeting with the sorcerer a wonderful event, full of surprises and opportunities, that everyone around could not help but be imbued with her enthusiasm and hope for the best. The world around sparkled with new bright colors, as if nature had decided to surprise everyone with its diversity, and a flower of hope blossomed, symbolizing rebirth and renewal, which filled the hearts of the inhabitants with joy and light. At that moment, Karen saw herself in Isabel, young and naive, and this sight evoked in her soul tremulous memories of the carefree times of her childhood. She really wanted to help the princess, doing everything possible so that she could live to adulthood and get rid of the cursed seal that had tormented her for so long. As she walked down the corridor, the lady was determined to share the heavy burden that Isabel carried and free her from the burden of suffering so that the princess could see a bright future. Suddenly, when everyone present was in a tense situation, a woman stopped in the middle of the team, her shoes gracefully tapping on the floor, and all eyes were on her at that moment. Karen asked for an audience with the emperor with determination, realizing that this was an important step for her daughter's future and wanting to gain the favor of the supreme power. Ron, sitting calmly on the edge of his chair, accepted the fact that his daughter was about to face serious magical training, which required not only effort but also complete dedication. Karen explained, looking into the emperor's eyes, that the girl had good potential that needed to be developed, and she believed that with the right approach she could surprise everyone. From the outside, it seemed like the ruler didn't care about the princess, which was pretty obvious considering she wasn't born a boy, and that gave rise to a lot of preconceived notions. However, the way he looked thoughtfully, now Ron looked away, covering his face with his hand, meaning that he didn't really care about his daughter's fate, and he felt deep emotions about it. The ladies, with their aristocratic upbringing and manners, discussed the financial aspects that might be needed to organize the upcoming training, since the further development of their ward depended on it. Having learned that Ron didn't set strict budgetary limits and Karen couldn't help but compare herself to him, realizing that Ron had something in common, they both truly cared about the little princess and wanted only the best for her. The cup, lifted from the saucer by elegant and graceful fingers, attracted attention with its refined design, which emphasized the refined taste of its owner and created an atmosphere of sophistication. The man, having drunk his tea and closed his eyes, was lost in thought. He did not yet realize that he was actually showing concern for the girl, and this feeling gradually began to cause strong emotions in him. Karen couldn't help but wonder if the ruler himself wasn't interested in learning about the baby's powers and her potential, which could be incredible and open up new horizons in magic. In the world of magic, talent is undoubtedly the most important aspect that distinguishes a sorcerer from others, and it is this gift that allows him to reach unprecedented heights and reveal his abilities. In the meantime, the maiden began to explain to the ruler that the abilities that manifest in magic play an extremely important role, since they can influence the fate of the empire and its inhabitants, opening up new horizons in the magical arts. The man, sitting in a chair, crossed his legs, changing his position. This gesture indicated his confidence and slight disregard for what was happening, creating an atmosphere of tension in the conversation. Coldly and rudely, as was his habit, the emperor reminded his mentor about his daughter, expressing his dissatisfaction with her place in the empire, and urged her not to forget her duties and that she should be more attentive. Bowing her head, the lady resigned herself to the fact that she had little right in an empire where brute force and military might were valued above all else, and this realization filled her with a feeling of hopelessness and sadness. The girl rose from her seat, thinking about leaving and not bothering the emperor anymore, expressing her gratitude to him for the time he had given her and for the opportunity to discuss such important matters. However, before Karen could leave the office, she was stopped by a male voice that suddenly rang out in the silence, causing the girl to freeze in place and pay attention to the speaker. Looking away in embarrassment, Ron, full of thought, asked his interlocutor if Isabel was happy in her practice of magic, showing interest in her emotional state and satisfaction. The answer was positive. The girl always smiled widely and was happy to practice magic, which inspired hope for her bright future and confirmed her attachment to this art. The man was satisfied with this answer, since he sincerely cared about Isabel's fate. Karen, on the other hand, was asking about such things for the first time, and was therefore shocked to realize that the interest Ron went beyond simple assessments. Usually, concerned parents were only interested in what talent their child had and whether he would be able to survive in a harsh world where magic sometimes became the cause of problems, not happiness. The guards, standing at the doorway, constantly guarded the room where important events took place, demonstrating their loyalty and readiness to protect those inside from any threats and unwanted interference. Karen hastened to tell the emperor the rumors that many believed that Ron did not particularly like his daughter, and this caused a lot of talk among the nobility, creating an atmosphere of discontent and anxiety. For the emperor, such rumors were just empty nonsense. He sighed heavily with a grin, not wanting to get involved in gossip and intrigue that could distract him from more important matters. With a curtsy, Karen bid farewell to the aristocrat, expressing her respect and admiration for him, which was appropriate in their high society and emphasized her manners. However, the man's hand, which was gripping the armrest of the seat more tightly, betrayed his inner experiences, and this did not escape the attention of those around him, creating a tense atmosphere. Suddenly there was a loud noise that startled the guards outside, and they became alert, ready for any surprises that might arise at this important moment. Several days passed, and in the imperial capital, envoys from various factions gathered to congratulate the emperor on his birthday. A crowd of aristocrats and gardeners gathered at the entrance, ready for a celebration full of flowers and exquisite treats. The count, with a polite smile and genuine interest, greeted the beautiful lady, after which the two began to discuss the latest news, which, oddly enough, had become relevant in high society, including rumors of noble intrigues. Other members of the nobility also took part in the discussion, commenting on both the actions taken to please the emperor and the beautiful, truly fine weather, which seemed to only contribute to the good mood. The empress, with the delicacy of a true lady, adjusted her husband's clothes, whispering to him tenderly that he should be patient and not show his irritation, at least on a birthday, when the whole atmosphere should be filled with joy. Like an obedient puppy, the man, with sincere respect for his wife, made a vow that he would behave well and try not to upset her, because on this special day his behavior must be exemplary and correspond to high responsibility. One of the venerable nobles, not without pride, introduced to the royal family his eldest son, who this year had finally reached his majority, preparing to enter adulthood with new hopes and dreams of a bright future. Ron, feeling awkward, involuntarily caught the admiring glances of the ladies who were enthusiastically discussing the emperor's appearance, and this made him embarrassed because he did not know how to react to such genuine interest in the person. One of the courtiers, with particular enthusiasm and a solemn mood, loudly announced that before the planned event began, the famous pianists would perform their delightful performance, which would certainly be a bright highlight of the evening. Another nobleman, possessing undisputed power, gave orders to his servants to carefully carry the tongue, which served as a gift to the emperor, so that everything would be done with due attention and respect for the distinguished guest. A guy in a formal suit, showing all his politeness, bowed before the crowd, preparing to play the piano that stood nearby, and his face expressed complete concentration and readiness to please the listeners with his playing. The weather outside was beautiful, with a light breeze playing with the branches of the trees, giving a special atmosphere to the event, and the majestic mansion served as a backdrop to everything that was happening, reflecting the light of the sun. The maid, standing nearby, watched the little girl, who sat down on the grass and looked out at something with curiosity, immersed in the world of her childish fantasies, involuntarily creating a touching scene in this atmosphere. The princess, dressed in a magnificent blue dress and with a bright bow on her head, turned around when the maid called her, and her eyes reflected curiosity and interest in what was happening around her. While Isabel was admiring the beautiful flower, the maid stood nearby, feeling confused and tired from the little girl's pranks and constant attempts to escape from her watchful eye, which caused her slight anxiety. The plant was indeed amazingly beautiful, with white petals that resembled innocence and freshness, as if it had just blossomed in the morning sun, attracting the attention of everyone around. Using her magic, the princess caused the plant to begin to glow with a soft golden light, which filled the space around with magic and added a fairy tale atmosphere to this amazing scene. The nanny, deeply impressed by this miracle, opened her mouth in complete delight, her cheeks slightly flushed with surprise as she watched in admiration the manifestation of magic that brought the flower to life and turned an ordinary moment into something truly magical. Smiling at her maid, the girl with a caring smile was happy that in her new body she could run and walk, enjoying every minute of her freedom and previously unseen opportunities. The wind gently stirred the grass, the trees rustled in the garden, creating an atmosphere of lightness and tranquility which added to the charm of this beautiful moment. The princess smiled because the absence of pain made her truly happy, allowing her to forget about the past and focus on the present, full of joy and new discoveries. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a terrible figure in a cloak and mask appeared, and at that moment, the nanny disappeared somewhere, leaving the little girl alone with a stranger who maliciously said that he did not expect to see such a treasure of the emperor in such a place. Looking with big eyes at this mysterious man, the little girl, full of innocent curiosity, asked who this uncle was and what he was doing here. The terrible figure in the dark cloak replied that he was trying to understand whether the princess was adopted or whether she really was the heiress that was so much talked about in the empire. With the innocence of a child, Isabel replied that she had a father, namely the emperor of the entire empire himself, proud of her origins and who she really was. These words, spoken by the impudent girl, caused the stranger to burst into a dull laugh that spread through the air, as if he could not contain his surprise and bewilderment, because he did not expect to hear such insolence from such a young person. The man spread his arms wide and said that if she really was a princess, it would only make the situation worse, since she had no guards assigned to her and was in danger without realizing the seriousness of the situation. After this, the stranger, suddenly becoming serious and sullen, ordered the girl to follow him, declaring that from that moment on, she would have to obey him and not show any resistance, otherwise the consequences could be very sad. When the little girl asked if he was going to kidnap her, the man replied that he had completely different plans because he was going to make a great magician out of her, which, it seemed, should have caused her admiration, not fear. Isabel, looking closely at the man who stood in front of her, replied with a slight doubt in her voice that she initially thought that he was a very intelligent man, but now, seeing his true intentions, she began to doubt his wisdom and good intentions. It was not difficult to guess that since the stranger was moving freely around the palace, he was probably one of the invited guests, which suggested his high importance and secret intentions. Moreover, this man also had a free command of seal magic, which made him even more mysterious and dangerous, because such an ability allowed him to manipulate the surrounding reality, opening up many possibilities for him. The little girl raised her finger and pointed curiously at her interlocutor, clearly trying to attract attention and determine who he really was, because her instincts told her that he was not quite an ordinary person. Without thinking twice, the girl named the kidnapper, pronouncing it with confidence, William, and there was a childish spontaneity in her voice, while tension and anxiety hung in the air. This suspicious man also turned out to be Karin's former teacher, who was skilled in magic, which added even more questions to his true intentions and what he was doing here. Rising from his knees, the kidnapper responded with gratitude to such a noble comparison, but he noted with a smile that this was not his name, thereby hinting that his true nature was hidden from everyone, and that he had a much more complex and multifaceted past. The little girl narrowed her eyes in boredom and replied that she didn't believe him, and there was a determination in her voice that emphasized her wariness of the stranger and his words, as if she could sense that something was wrong. Suddenly, from behind the stranger, Biton appeared, a knight who was ready to stand up for the princess and not let her fall into the hands of this mysterious and possibly dangerous man. Without thinking, the knight, with fury and determination, pierced the mage with his sword, trying to protect the princess, and at that moment the air was filled with tension, as if time stood still. Biton glared menacingly at the wizard, asking why he had come alone. Didn't he have his head if he was going to act so stupidly, since there was clearly something wrong with this sinister plan? The guy, not paying attention to the situation, grabbed the maid and pushed her aside as if she was of no importance in this conflict, which added even more fear and anxiety to the atmosphere. The maid, falling on her knees, crying, asked the little girl if she was all right, and her voice was full of anxiety, for she could not bear the thought that the princess might be in danger. It turned out that the magician did not resist, because in fact he was in a completely different place, sending only his magical projection to the palace, which emphasized his incredible strength and ability to manipulate the surrounding reality. Biton's blade was pointed at the kidnapper's neck, and a heavy tension hung in the air, creating the feeling that at any moment something terrible could happen that would change the course of events forever. With a grin on his face, Byton stated that he had outstanding skills in finding evidence of someone's guilt, and his confidence sounded in such a way that it caused fear in even the bravest, since he knew how to find the truth. With cruelty in his voice, the boy added that he would not leave any evidence and could easily finish off the magician right then and there, showing that he was ready to go to extreme measures to protect the princess. The servants, overcome with fear and with bated breath, stood at a distance with the little girl, watching what was happening with indescribable horror, because they could not understand how this dangerous situation would end. Byton, without losing his composure and with a forced smile on his face, said that he would definitely find the magician in reality and punish him for attempting to kidnap the lady, determined to restore justice. Slowly, the wizard began to disappear after the swing of the knight's sword, and his figure dissolved into the air like a shadow, leaving behind an atmosphere of uncertainty and anxiety that enveloped everyone present. The servants, kneeling down, anxiously asked the princess about her well-being, trying to understand if everything was all right after the recent tense situation, because she was worried about the fate of her young mistress. Byton was genuinely glad that Isabel was not afraid when she met the dark sorcerer, and his heart was filled with pride for her courage, because such self-confidence testified to her strong spirit. The little girl, her eyes wide with incomprehension, asked why she should be afraid, and her voice sounded childish curiosity mixed with a sincere naivety that made her even more charming. Grabbing the faithful knight by the hand, the girl, smiling, said that she believed in him, and therefore there was no room for fear in her heart, which added confidence to both and created a special bond between them. This touching confession brought tears of joy and pride to the swordsman, because he understood that his protection and care for the princess were not in vain, and his efforts bore fruit. The man hugged the baby tenderly, enveloped in warmth and love, and was ready to protect her from the whole world, because in his eyes she was the most precious thing he had ever known. The princess, with a slight smile on her face and sparks of joy in her eyes, whispered with carefree enthusiasm that Byton was the best and strongest knight, and compared to everyone else, he looked just incredibly cool, which raised her spirits. The palace, towering over the surrounding landscape, stood proudly displaying its luxury and beauty, which seemed to have been created specifically to delight guests and residents, filling their hearts with pride in their heritage. It was astonishing that the older man in the cloak, without the slightest fear or shame, dared to encroach on the princess, disturbing the peace of the castle, which was always considered a safe and protected place for all its inhabitants. Stroking the baby's cheek with tenderness and care, the guy made a vow that he would definitely find the loser kidnapper and punish him in order to restore justice and protect the princess from any threats that might come from the outside world. It was time for the knight to leave the cozy hall to go on patrol, and so he waved goodbye to the little girl, promising to send knights to the clearing who would ensure the safety and guard the princess while he was away. Isabel, with childish delight and enthusiasm, sat down on the floor and returned to the fun, determined to try her magic, holding her hands out in front of her in the hope of calling forth something wonderful and magical from her imagination. When the maid asked her what she was going to do, the girl proudly explained that she was making a flower ring for her father, wanting to give him a gift that would bring joy and brighten his day, because she wanted to please a loved one. With a selfless look, full of confidence and determination, the little girl declared that she would present the gift to her parent herself, emphasizing her independence and desire to show care, which made her even more charming and inspired pride. The maid carried the girl tenderly in her arms, step by step, moving along the large corridor of the palace, which was decorated with magnificent paintings and luxurious fabrics, creating an atmosphere of celebration and splendor. As they approached the banquet hall, a group of people appeared before them who strictly forbade them to go further, and this unexpected obstacle made the girl wary and wonder what might happen. Frowning, the little girl sternly ordered the guards to make way, confidently calling her name, determined to get her way and show that she was not going to give up, even if she encountered obstacles in her path. The guards' faces became puzzled, and they frowned as they stood there, as if they didn't know how to react to such an unexpected situation, with such a small girl with bright eyes and an unwavering spirit standing in front of them. After this, the boys leaned over the child and, smiling, said that she should not have pretended to be a princess, considering her too cute and clearly not believing that such a little one could be the true heir to the empire with great rights and responsibilities. Isabel, without losing any time, got off the maid's hands and resolutely stepped forward with her little foot, full of confidence and determination to defend her rights, which added courage to her in this difficult situation. With her hands on her hips, the girl, with childish persistence, ordered the men to state their names and ranks, as if not realizing that they might be higher in position and power than she, and there was an undeniable authority in her voice. The guards sighed heavily, amazed by the audacity of the girl, who, despite her young age, showed amazing courage and determination, and this made them think about how they would respond to such a challenge. After this, she turned to the servants, saying that they should have watched the baby's behavior more closely and returned her back to her parents, since her safety should have been their priority, and they had no right to leave her alone. However, Isabel did not calm down and, insistently demanding that the guards immediately state their names and ranks, used her commanding tone that left no room for doubt, demonstrating that even at a young age, she knows how to behave like a real princess. Frowning and puffing out her cheeks, the princess stated that they could call the captain if they did not recognize the royal person by sight, emphasizing her importance and status, and this made the guards think about their duty and obligations. Now she was being watched by many eyes, and so the girl had to act carefully and decisively, since she was a representative of blue blood, which imposed certain obligations and expectations on her from society. A man dressed in white robes stood in the middle of the hall and showed off his gift to the emperor, which was a large container filled with mana created by the Mages Association, and his pride in this achievement was obvious. The empress, sitting next to her husband, spoke quietly to him, their hands close, creating an atmosphere of trust and understanding between them, for they both knew how important this moment was for their empire and the future of magic. Covering her face with her hand, the girl said that the ruler should thank a man named William for such a wonderful gift, because generosity and attention should always be appreciated, especially when it comes to something important for the empire. The head of the Mages Association was, in fact, the very person who could represent the interests of the emperor and shared the territories of the continent with him, influencing politics, which made his figure not only influential, but also important for the future. And suddenly Ron noticed a strange noise, a child's cry that ordered everyone to get out of the way and not interfere, and it sounded so imperious that he couldn't help but pay attention to it, realizing that someone was determined to get their way. He turned his attention to the closed door next to him, from behind which his daughter's voice could be heard, eagerly demanding that the knights state their names and ranks, and this added tension to the atmosphere, as if the little princess really was not going to put up with obstacles. The empress glanced sideways at her husband, not understanding why he had suddenly become so confused, and worry crept into her heart, because she knew that his reaction could mean something serious, something that required their immediate intervention. Therefore, the lady took on her husband's duties and thanked the magician for such a wonderful gift, emphasizing its importance to the kingdom and expressing the hope that in the future they would definitely cooperate to increase all the blessings. While the lady was talking about her plans and expectations, Ron began to rise from his throne, his majestic presence adding confidence to everyone around him, as his decision always carried great importance for all members of the court. After he stood up, the man loudly declared for the princess to be led inside, and his voice was so powerful and authoritative that it left no room for discussion or doubt on the part of the guards. The guards flinched violently at the cold order, and surprise flashed in their eyes, for they knew they had to act quickly to avoid disturbing order and incurring the ruler's wrath. They immediately began apologizing to the princess, begging her to politely come inside, realizing the seriousness of the situation and wanting to correct their mistake as quickly as possible. The little girl, full of determination and confidence, grabbed the man's gloved hand and held it tightly in her little palm, feeling that she was safe next to this noble man. With a smile holding on to the wanderer's fingers, Isabel forgave him for his mistake, for in her soul there reigned nobility and a desire to give everyone a chance to correct themselves, even if they were wrong. The guard was deeply touched by such kind words, and his heart was filled with warmth from the princess's sincerity, because she, despite her young age, showed amazing nobility and wisdom. With a chuckle and a playful glint in her eyes, Isabel promised to forgive him for his mistake if he bought her some jelly or brought her some sweets next time, because childish spontaneity could always melt the hearts of adults. The door that opened before them was all in gold, sparkling in the light and creating an atmosphere of magic that surrounded everyone who entered this luxurious hall where royal solemnity reigned. Standing in front of her father, the little girl said loudly and proudly that she had also prepared a gift for him, emphasizing how much she loved him and wanted to please him, because such moments had always been important for both of them. Ignoring the conversations behind her back about how slovenly she was dressed and how dirty her face was, the girl walked boldly forward to her father, confident in herself and in her love for him, because for her this was the most important meeting. Hearing the noble's words, the emperor's eyes became cold and angry, because he could not accept the fact that his daughter, standing in front of everyone, dared to condemn and harshly criticize the people at court, which only fueled his anger. The noblewomen, realizing the seriousness of the situation, immediately fell awkwardly silent, hiding their faces behind gloves or fans, realizing that the emperor was furious, and their words could cause even greater discontent. The little girl's hands, full of hope and trepidation, rose to the emperor, giving him her gift, and at that moment she felt the full importance of this gesture because she wanted to please her father with something special and significant. The man, standing on the steps and looking down at his daughter, asked with interest and caution what gift she had brought him, wanting to understand what she had prepared and how she was going to soften his mood. With a smile on her face, Isabel explained that she had decided to give him a ring and hopefully asked him to rise higher to personally give it to her dad, emphasizing the importance of the moment. However, Ron, not wanting to remain on the ledge, came down himself and, kneeling next to his daughter, showed how much he valued this gift and how important the connection with his beloved girl was to him. The ring she made was woven from 2 dandelions, small and fragile, symbolizing her sincere feelings and care for her father, because even the simplest things can contain deep meaning and unconditional love. The father carefully adjusted his daughter's hair, noticing with slight sadness that she was dirty, and at that moment his heart filled with tenderness because he always tried to take care of her well-being and cleanliness. The little girl, with genuine joy and pride, put the ring on one of her dad's fingers, thereby showing that this gift was important to her and symbolized their strong connection, despite all the trials they had to face. After this, Isabel, full of happiness, joyfully said that she was happy to see her parent next to her because for her his presence meant a lot and brought an indescribable feeling of security. The emperor's hands shook from surprise and overwhelming emotion because at that moment he realized how much he valued his daughter and how important she was to him, and this filled his heart with warmth. Continuing to sit opposite his daughter, he admitted that he also really liked her gift because it contained not only childish spontaneity but also deep love, which made their connection even more meaningful and touching. The empress, tenderly cuddles up to her husband, lay in a cozy bed with a sincere smile on her lips, noting that her husband's behavior really seemed strange. At first he was bored at the banquet celebration and then suddenly began to smile radiantly. Ron, feeling awkward and wanting to justify himself, began to vigorously deny his wife's words, assuring her that he did not experience such feelings, which only fueled the lady's laughter and created an atmosphere of light irony between them. Embarrassed and a little confused, the ruler of the empire looked away, trying to hide his feelings and thoughts that suddenly began to roll over him like waves. And at that moment, it became especially difficult for him to maintain control over his emotions. Speaking affectionately to her husband and tenderly stroking his face, the lady sadly added that after the birthday, they had a lot of work ahead of them, and now they would not see the princess for 3 or 4 months, or maybe more, which filled her heart with longing for moments together. The man closed his eyes, obviously disappointed by these words, and his facial expression betrayed all his feelings, sharpening the atmosphere of their conversation and giving it a note of melancholy. The man's hand gently grabbed the woman's and squeezed it tightly in a gentle gesture, as if trying to convey his emotions to her and express support in this difficult moment. The woman could not help but smile brightly at her husband's tenderness, and her heart was filled with warmth, which softened her sadness, creating a feeling of closeness and understanding between them. He, like a true gentleman, gave his wife a kiss on the palm, which became a touching moment of their mutual love and respect for each other, despite all the trials. Suddenly there was a noise and the door creaked open, interrupting their tender moment, and a man walked in while the princess, comfortably seated in her chair, continued to enjoy her meal. It was Ron, dressed in a white shirt and vest with dark pants, and his hair was neatly combed to the side, giving him a stylish and confident look that could cause admiration. The little girl immediately jumped up from her seat and rushed to her father, because they had not seen each other for a long time, and the joy of the meeting filled her little heart. Leaning closer and reaching forward, Ron explained to his daughter that he and her mother would not be able to visit her in the near future, which caused her slight confusion and anxiety. After this, the man put his hand on the baby's head and added that they were leaving for work, trying to soften her grief from this news so that she would understand that they had not forgotten about her. Isabel, having learned that her parents would only return for her birthday, began to nervously squeeze her palms, realizing that this waiting time would be so long, and sadness from separation crept into her soul. Being a smart girl, Isabel thought that her parents would return to her only in 8 months, and tears sparkled in her eyes from the realization of the long wait, which seemed endless to her. The emperor's lips began to tremble as he tried to suppress a smile, hearing the little girl declare with tender sincerity that she would miss her mother and father. This childish purity and sincere feelings touched him to the depths of his soul and made his heart fill with warmth. He extended his arms to his daughter with the gentle intention of hugging her and holding the baby close to him, trying to convey all his love and care so that she would feel his support in this difficult moment. However, before he could do so, his body suddenly tensed up, and as he clenched his hands tightly into fists, he felt the veins on his arms bulge, causing him to feel anxious and uneasy. Isabel, with her head cocked to the side in confusion, asked with genuine interest and concern what had happened to her father, sensing that something was wrong and wanting to understand how she could help him in this difficult hour. In response to her question, Ron promised that he would try to return as soon as possible, gently stroking her hair with his hand, as if wanting to calm her down and assure her that he would still remain close to her in his heart, despite the distance. After this, the ruler, full of love and tenderness, leaned down and gave his daughter a soft and warm kiss on the forehead, which became a symbol of his care and promise that despite all the difficulties, he would always protect and love her. Biden walked confidently through the closed door where he was to meet the emperor, and with his hands behind his back he pushed him down, demonstrating his loyalty and determination in the performance of his duties. Walking quickly behind his master, the knight could not contain his curiosity and was impatient to find out what exactly the princess had said before leaving Ron, because it could shed light on their relationship and the impact on the situation. Ron, answering honestly and openly, reported that the little girl said that she would miss her father and was also looking forward to his return, which touches the heart of any parent who values the connection with their children. After this, the man added in an emotionless tone that he never saw Biden as a rival for his daughter's attention, thereby emphasizing that he knew about his knight's loyalty. Biden raised his hands indignantly and expressed his displeasure, stating that the ruler had undoubted talent and that it was his arrogance that prevented him from seeing the true value of his people and their feelings. Feeling depressed and burdened by all these thoughts, the guy decided to take out his frustration on one person he knew, wanting to find an outlet for his suppressed emotions and regain his confidence. This unfortunate man turned out to be a kidnapper who had planned to steal the princess at a banquet, but his plans failed and he was caught. 8 months passed quickly, and the palace, in which an atmosphere of expectation and hope reigned, shone with a snow-white, luxurious splendor, delighting everyone with its magnificence. The maid entered the room, congratulating the little girl on her birthday, and holding in her hands a gorgeous cake, decorated with bright candles and sweets that promised joy and happiness. Isabel, dressed in a smart red dress, turned to the maid with joy, feeling excitement and happiness because her long-awaited holiday had finally arrived. Thanks to her father's blood, the girl grew up quickly, almost before our eyes, and now she walked quickly towards her nanny, sincerely rejoicing at this significant moment. Unable to contain her excitement, she asked the nanny if there was any news from her parents and whether they would hide their plans for their return, because every word could bring her hope of meeting her loved ones. Isabel smiled sheepishly at the refusal, although she knew that her parents were busy with important matters and work that required their attention and concentration. The cake, topped with white cream and fresh strawberries, looked gorgeous and was full of the promise of the sweet treat that awaited her at the celebration. The day passed quickly, and now it was night, only 5 minutes left until the new day would begin. The princess stood by the window, looking at the stars, sincerely wishing that her parents were there to share this special moment with her. Celebrating her birthday with her nanny, the little girl enthusiastically accepted her offer to light candles, feeling incredible magic and joy in the air. With a snap of her fingers, the candles magically lit up, filling the room with a warm light that symbolized the hope, happiness, and dreams that lay ahead. The candles on the cake, covered in bright cream patterns, were lit again, and their flames flickered merrily, creating an atmosphere of celebration and magic, filling the room with warmth and joy. The little girl, looking at the cake with curiosity, thought about what wish she should make, because this moment was full of hopes and expectations, as if life itself was offering her to choose something important and cherished. With her hands folded in front of her in a gesture of prayer, Isabel silently asked that she could celebrate her next birthday with her parents, who were so far away, and her heart filled with the warmth of this sincere dream. A bitter thought reminded the girl that the candles on the cake had to be extinguished before the end of the day, otherwise this wonderful moment might remain in her memory forever, but Isabel hoped that her parents would return before it was all over. Suddenly, adult voices were heard from the doorway, and their sound immediately filled the room with confidence and joy, as if the whole world had come to life in that moment. There, in the doorway, stood the princess's father, dressed in a formal shirt, his figure radiating strength and care, as if he were not just a parent, but a real knight, ready to protect his daughter and share this magical moment with her. The girl jumped up from her seat, frightened by the fact that her dad was covered in blood, and at that moment her heart began to beat faster, as if a feeling of danger and anxiety hung in the air. The touched empress stood next to her husband, saying that she had previously asked her husband to change his clothes, and her voice sounded like a melody, full of concern, but also slight irritation, which could not leave those around her indifferent. Isabel stood in shock as she watched her parents argue over trifles, and it seemed so out of place against the backdrop of what was happening that a real storm of emotions was born in her soul, mixing fear and bewilderment. Ron couldn't help but shudder in fear and horror when his wife said that if he continued to behave like this, his daughter would hate him, and it was like a bolt from the blue, making his heart clench with worry. The mother went towards her daughter, addressing her affectionately, as if trying to embrace her with her warmth and care, trying to help her cope with these difficult moments that filled the room with tension. Gently hugging her daughter, the mother congratulated the princess on her birthday, and in this touching moment there was such sincerity and love that the atmosphere around was filled with warmth and light, as if the whole world was frozen in anticipation. Isabel couldn't hold back the tears of happiness that suddenly washed over her like a wave, and she felt joy spreading in her chest, making her heart flutter with overwhelming emotions that could not be expressed in words. So, hugging her mother back, she burst into tears like a little child, and at that moment the tears flowed freely, as if releasing all her experiences, fears, and joys, filling her world with light and hope. Her palm gripped the lady's dress tighter, not wanting to let go, and this feeling was so strong that it seemed as if they were connected by invisible threads of love that could withstand any test. The emperor stood awkwardly nearby, not daring to join them, feeling out of place in this touching moment, as if he had broken the harmony that reigned between mother and daughter, and his heart was filled with a kindly melancholy. The little girl cried, lamenting how she loved it when her mother hugged her, and in those moments she felt safe, as if the whole world had stopped, and only their love remained unchanged and bright, like the light of the sun. Isabel fell asleep tiredly in the arms of the noblewoman while she watched her tenderly with her husband, and it was such a touching sight that their hearts filled with warmth and pride for their little princess. The bright light from the window shone through the curtains, swaying in the wind, creating soft highlights and shadows in the room that played as if they wanted to tell a story about how quickly time flies in this magical place. The man, sitting in the corner of the room, was reading a book, while the princess slowly woke up on the bed and, rubbing her eyes with her hand, tried to understand where she was, and her innocent look reflected all the purity and freshness of the morning awakening. There, in the chair next to her, sat her father, engrossed in his reading, and he was amazed at how familiarly his daughter called him, as if in their world there were no barriers between parents and children, but only love and mutual understanding. Jumping out of bed, the little girl apologized, but with some seriousness noted that familiarity was not always appropriate, and her words sounded like the wisdom inherent only to those who know how to value the boundaries of personal space. Coming closer to her father, Isabel asked if she could call him that affectionately when they were alone, and, having received consent, felt joy and warmth spread through her heart from this connection. Opening her mouth, the princess added that since she was already 5 years old, she should behave like an adult, with dignity and grace, because she realized the importance of her behavior and how it reflected the family. Putting his hand on his daughter's hair, Ron stated that she was still a child, and hidden in that statement was the tender concern of a father who would always protect and support his daughter, no matter her age. Isabel smiled sweetly and repeated the words she had previously spoken to her mother, also addressing them to her father, that she was glad to see him here next to her, and in this confession there was a sense of sincerity and happiness, as if they were inextricably linked. The man's mouth dropped open in surprise, and his cheeks flushed slightly with embarrassment, as if he had become young and vulnerable again, feeling all the love that his daughter generously gave him in this simple but important moment. The princess, with a gentle and slightly frightened voice, asked if her father had been with her all night, since she had been very tired the previous night and had fallen asleep quickly, without noticing how time had passed. And at that moment, childish carelessness filled the room with an atmosphere of love and care. The emperor, as the story goes, was the strongest man, and his mother was the whole universe for him, and this created harmony in their lives, where love and support played the main role in their relationship. The girl thought with hope that if her father was tired every day, they would be able to spend more time with each other, and this dream became a source of inspiration for her, filling her heart with bright hopes for the future. Ron noticed that his daughter had evil thoughts, but he didn't mind because he understood how important it is for a child to have the right to their feelings, even if they sometimes seem contradictory and complicated. The little girl shyly asked her father to get tired and spend at least this one day with her on her birthday, because there were only 16 such days left, and in these words there was such sincerity and longing for closeness. The man's mouth dropped open in surprise, but he remained silent. Isabel was afraid that she had somehow offended or angered her father, and this feeling of anxiety filled her heart, making her worry about their relationship. Standing up from his seat, the ruler said with a serious expression on his face that he would assign more math lessons to Isabel and Karen, as 6 years old was an awfully young age to master such complex concepts. The little girl listened in shock to her father's words about how small all the 2-digit numbers were, and in her perception the world seemed to turn upside down because she had never thought of them as something complicated or difficult, and this discovery made her think about her knowledge. Placing his hand on his daughter's head, the father added that such thoughts about the baby's imminent death were tiring him out, and there was such concern and care in his voice that Isabel felt how important every minute spent together was for him. After which, kneeling down next to her, Ron said that he always felt tired when he was around her, and when he held her hands, he seemed to understand that with this act he was expressing all his love for his daughter, and this sincerity touched his heart. After which the man hugged the baby tightly, pressing her to himself, and in this embrace, she felt the full power of his protection and care, as if their connection was unbreakable and powerful, capable of overcoming any obstacles. The ruler himself, full of sad thoughts, was immersed in his thoughts about how he could prolong the life of his beloved daughter, and this anxiety did not give him peace, causing real melancholy in his heart. When her father's kind words reached her ears, Isabel could not hold back the tears that flowed down her cheeks, because she understood how much he cared for her, and this feeling of warmth was very close to her. The man, seeing how her eyes filled with tears, carefully wiped them from her face, trying to comfort his beloved daughter in this way, because he understood how important it was for her to feel his support in this difficult moment. Meanwhile, Mother, leaving them alone, went to an important meeting with a famous hero, and this added a sense of uncertainty and anxiety to the atmosphere, because without her, everything looked different. Confused by what was happening, Isabel asked her father why he could not go on the journey with her mother, because she did not understand why she and her father should remain away from her at such important moments. Ron, with a slight smile, replied that he needed to go to the palace to take care of important business, and then, holding out his hand to his daughter, invited her to go with him since the princess already had plans to move to another place. The little girl, with full confidence and hope, extended her small hand into the strong and caring hand of her father, and at that moment, a feeling of an inseparable connection arose between them that warmed their hearts. Isabel smiled happily, because the palace of the Reina was the place where all the children of the imperial family lived, and this thought filled her with joy, because new discoveries and adventures awaited her ahead. Until they reached the age of 5, all the children lived in the same comfortable place, but after this time they moved to a huge house, and this transition was perceived as the beginning of their political life, full of obligations and responsibilities. The princess herself was looking forward to meeting her older brothers, who were an example and support for her, and she wanted to share her dreams and experiences with them. At the time when the palace of the Reina was not yet full, only Prince Mikhail, the youngest son with blonde hair and a radiant smile, lived here, who was also waiting for new meetings and impressions. Isabel, having made an important decision, quietly told herself that she would try to avoid participating in imperial intrigues, and this realization gave her confidence that she could remain true to her ideals and values. The large white mansion, with its magnificent architecture, towered before them, as if symbolizing the power and grandeur of the imperial family, and this spectacle was mesmerizing in its beauty and grandeur. Thus, for the first time in the long history of the imperial family, a girl, not a boy, came to the castle of the successors, and this event became a real sensation, especially in the company of the ruler himself. When they entered the mansion, the servants greeted their master with joy, and in this greeting one could feel the sincerity and devotion with which they served their emperor. Among them stood out the chief manager named Delza, who wore glasses and looked like a strict teacher, and her serious appearance gave her even more authority among the other servants. Out of the corner of her eye, the woman glanced briefly at the princess, who was standing next to her father, and her eyes reflected curiosity and bewilderment, because she did not expect to see a girl in this place. Politely, with youthful grace, the little girl introduced herself, bowing and demonstrating all the manners that had been instilled in her, and this gesture was filled with respect and nobility that distinguished her from others. Delza, shaking her head slightly, sternly said that the girl should not do that again, because her status was much higher than that of an ordinary maid, and this required special treatment and respect. Isabel, with a slight smile on her lips, could not call the manager an ordinary lady, because it was she who 10 years ago saved the emperor's life on the Hill of Pain, performing a real feat at the most critical moment. That day, on the battlefield, the brave maiden rushed to the defense of her master, risking her life, and later at the ceremony, when she was offered a reward, she modestly refused the honors, showing her true nobility. Surprised by the attention, Delza listened with interest to the girl's words about respect and recognition, because in her eyes, despite her status, there was hidden real value and wisdom that were inaccessible to many. Some even nicknamed this woman the Black Whale, the greatest swordswoman of all time, and this nickname only emphasized her strength and skill, which she demonstrated on the battlefield, thereby earning the love and respect of the people. Isabel, with complete seriousness in her voice, promised the courtier that she would be devoted to her, and this promise was very important to her because she understood that trust was the basis of their cooperation. The girl asked the maid to work together so that the two of them could become a real team in which harmony and mutual understanding would reign, and this decision was especially significant for her. Despite being only 5 years old, the princess was quite educated and intelligent, and her young mind had already surprised adults more than once, showing that there was great potential hidden within her. Meanwhile, Ron, concerned for his daughter's safety, asked the servants to keep a close eye on her while he himself was preparing to go to the National Assembly of Nobles, where he had to discuss important issues. Isabel, saying goodbye to her dad, waved her hand to him, and in her eyes one could read that bright feeling that only a father could give to his daughter, creating an atmosphere of warmth and love. The emperor walked majestically down the corridor, and at that moment the maid thought that the king should be more careful, otherwise his daughter could become his weakness, no matter what that meant. They were soon joined by another young man who stepped forward with ease, and his appearance promised new opportunities and intrigues in their lives. A sly smile played on the boy's lips, full of youthful confidence and enthusiasm, which indicated that he was ready for the new adventures that awaited him ahead. With a loud cry of delight, he jumped down from the railing, causing surprise to everyone around him, and joyfully announced that finally, his competitor, with whom he had been competing for so long, had appeared in the castle, which only fueled his excitement. The princess, seeing her older brother after a long time of separation, opened her mouth in surprise, not believing her eyes, and warm memories of their shared games and pranks in childhood flashed in her heart. Mikkel, being a little hooligan with an unchanging disobedient character, without paying attention to prohibitions, boldly jumped from the top floor, looking a little disheveled and with green eyes that resembled the look of their mother. Stubbornly, as if he knew what he wanted to say, the boy approached the woman and said with determination that the only thing that was important to him was mastering the sword, because everything else, in his opinion, had no meaning in the life of a real warrior. Lancer, being a knight, as well as the husband of the steward and the teacher of the little prince, possessed incredible strength of spirit and wisdom, which made him a role model not only for the younger generation, but also for everyone who knew him. Isabel, watching her brother, suddenly realized that they were somewhat similar, and this realization brought joy, because both of them hid the same courage and enthusiasm as their parents. Thanks to his noble blood, the boy grew quickly, and although he was still a child, his appearance already began to resemble a teenager, which gave him self-confidence and ambition. The girl turned to her brother and smiled and remarked that he looked very nice, and this simple confession filled his heart with warmth and pride that his sister cared for him so much. The little girl, with a gentle smile on her face, reminded her brother that they had seen each other at the sword selection ceremony, and there was a note of nostalgia in her voice, because that day had left an unforgettable impression in their memories. The manager stood to the side, watching the emperor's children, and in her eyes one could see pride in their achievements and hope for the bright future that they would create together. Mikkel, shocked by the girl's impudence, could not contain his surprise when she said stupid things and teased her brother, because for him it seemed both funny and annoying. Deciding to change the subject, Isabel asked her little brother if he was really strong, and when he answered in the affirmative, she added that she had heard somewhere that strong people often forget things, so she thought he was very strong. Mikkel, hearing his sister's words, was embarrassed and blushed a little, because he was pleased to hear such compliments, which only emphasized his importance in her eyes and gave him a sense of significance. Leaning towards her, he asked if she really thought that about him, and there was sincerity in his voice, because he couldn't believe that his sister saw him as a real hero. After which, feeling self-confident and proud, he smiled broadly and, full of enthusiasm, promised that next time he would definitely introduce his sister to his best friend, which added new colors to their conversation. Isabel, laughing and agreeing, was looking forward to this meeting because she wanted to know more about her brother's world and the adventures that awaited them ahead. Several days passed in the new house, but the princess's life did not change dramatically because she continued to enjoy every moment filled with warmth and joy despite all the changes around her. Dressed in a new blue dress, the girl with lively eyes and shiny hair listened attentively to her interlocutor, absorbing his every word as if it were the most important thing in the world. Lancer, a wise fencing teacher, carefully explained that the princess could not master the sword technique that was unique to the imperial family, since it required not only physical strength, but also a special grace of movement. So the man with a kind smile suggested playing house, thinking that such a game would help the princess better understand the basics of fencing. Suddenly the manager came up to them from behind, asking sternly. The knight's wife, possessing a powerful aura, frightened those around her with her authority and strictly ordered her husband not to fool around, but to teach the fencing lesson to the little girl with complete seriousness, so that she could learn all the subtleties of this noble art. Delza, strict but fair, strongly encouraged the girl to address her more formally when they were at work, emphasizing the importance of professionalism and respect in their relationship. With his head down, Lancer agreed unconditionally with everything his wife said, obediently and without objection, feeling an inner fear of her anger, which always seemed unbearable and destructive to him. Upon learning how much time had passed, the knight became indignant, realizing how poorly he had looked after the prince, and how his irresponsibility could have had serious consequences for all of them. Hesitantly justifying himself to his wife, he said that he was on his way to the prince to teach him the art of fencing, but Delza clearly did not seem to believe him, continuing to look at him with distrust. At that moment, Mikhail entered their room, who had come to the mentor for swordsmanship lessons, full of hope and aspirations, despite his inexperienced steps in this noble cause. The prince, closing his eyes and full of shame, rushed to run, apologizing for being late, trying to correct his mistake and not let down those who were counting on him. Behind him, on the boy's shoulder, sat some kind of black animal, which was difficult to see in the dim light, adding mystery and intrigue to what was happening in the room. Mikhail headed towards his sister, reminding her that he had previously promised to introduce her to his pet, who, being fearless and brave, had previously bravely fought with a real lion, which emphasized his outstanding qualities and courage. This pet, black and white in color with small but expressive eyes, looked attentively at the girl, as if foreshadowing that he was going to radically change her life and fill it with new, exciting adventures. Mikhail proudly boasted that his honey badger had fought 5 lions at once, and although this story did not sound particularly plausible, it still attracted attention and caused admiration from those around him. The boy happily explained that this battle was quite difficult, and that was why he helped his pet a little, who was currently growling and, like a real machine, tightly clung to the prince's shoulder as if protecting his master from possible dangers. Winking confidently at his sister, the boy said with a slight grin that he was late because he was looking for his little friend, and therefore he was absolutely justified in his detention, thereby trying to add fun to their conversation. Lancer played along with the boy, saying that his action was a true display of chivalry, and therefore he deserved not punishment, but a reward for his behavior, which was worthy of respect and praise. The two were happily acting out a scene in the theater, standing in front of the head manager who was looking sternly and attentively at the two pranksters, as if trying to evaluate their every move and word. The woman adjusted her glasses, watching their performance intently, as if deciding which of them was more talented and which of them was capable of causing greater admiration among the audience. Isabel, realizing that she needed to divert attention from the boy, decided to draw attention to herself by calling the girl's name and carefully lifting the hem of her dress to create a spectacular sight. Pressing her hand to her mouth, the girl explained that she was very hungry and therefore wanted to eat with the woman, as if trying to make this offer as convincing and attractive as possible. The room they were in was beautifully furnished, like that of true aristocrats, with luxurious sofas and numerous books, which created an atmosphere of comfort and intelligence. Karen, experienced and wise, gave a new lesson to the princess, telling her about the basics of the theory of magic, which aroused sincere interest and admiration in the listener, who was eager to learn more about the magical world. The little girl couldn't help but notice how suspicious the girl looked, and so she kept glancing at her mentor from under her book, trying to catch at least something that could explain such behavior. Karen had recently become especially attentive to the princess, which had aroused suspicion among those around her, and everyone began to whisper that the sorceress was collecting manna from the breath of the emperor's daughter, Honey, to use it for her own secret purposes. Raising her hand up, the girl resolutely declared that she had a question that was worrying her a lot, and she was ready to voice it, despite the slight excitement inside. Isabel, with a serious expression, asked if there could be a mana distortion in the honey badgers, and her serious tone gave the question special significance, emphasizing the importance of the information received. It turned out that this was quite possible when the animals ate the magic-filled stone, which caused surprise and interest among everyone present, because such a fact opened up new perspectives. Isabel again approached her mentor, asking if it was possible to take advantage of such a distortion and force the honey badger to fight on their side, which showed her willingness to use any means necessary to achieve her goal. The girl was a true genius, possessing a unique talent to mentally see magical flows of mana, which made her special among her peers, because such a gift was extremely rare and was worth its weight in gold. The teacher became serious and asked the student sternly if she had felt anything strange lately, and there was a note of caution in her voice, as if she was looking for confirmation of her fears. The little girl folded her hands in front of her and, nervously playing with her fingers, explained that she had seen something strange, but thought that she could make friends with the evil honey badger, which showed incredible courage and determination. Karen leaned towards her student and suggested that they study the limits of the princess's mana together to find out how to use her enormous abilities to their full potential and avoid potential problems. Several days passed, and Isabel was carefully studying the documents scattered before her, immersed in reading, as if looking for the key to solving her problem. The mentor stood nearby, pointing to the theorem and equations on the paper, saying that they could be improved, but that a few pieces of data were missing to complete the work. Isabel pouted, lost in thought. She was not sure how to find the root of a number, and this puzzled her, leaving her with the feeling that she was on the verge of an important discovery that still eluded her. When asked by the teacher to explain the equation, the girl excitedly explained that the magic number was negative, but the real problem was that it had to be squared, which complicated the whole process. Isabel frowned, realizing that it was difficult to impress Karina with her average knowledge of mathematics, since her mentor had a much deeper understanding and experience in this field. On the paper were written words and formulas, as well as problems that were extremely difficult to solve, and they seemed incomprehensible to the girl, like riddles that required a special approach and careful analysis. Isabel said clever things that sometimes seemed to escape her, while Karen nodded proudly next to her, encouraging the girl and showing that she was on the right path to understanding. When asked how to find the root of the magic equation, Isabel confidently replied that they should calculate the angle theta in one of the planes, which, in her opinion, was an important step towards solving a complex problem. Recalling her previous knowledge of mathematics, the girl constructed the function with deep concentration, and thus she felt that she was getting closer to solving the problem. But in this magical world, the necessary knowledge was lacking. Karen, with some trepidation, asked the student who exactly taught her math, and this question scared the little girl, as she had an anxious feeling that somewhere she could have made a mistake that could have led to serious consequences. Smiling and trying not to reveal her secret, Isabel easily answered that she had studied the subject herself, and her words were filled with pride in her own achievements, although in fact she had often experienced difficulties in mastering mathematics. Karen's face remained expressionless, and her tone of voice was cold, which added a certain tension to the situation, although inside she was literally seething with joy at how cute and smart the girl turned out to be. Karen, with genuine interest, asked the little girl to join her and go to the nearest scientific conference to take part in a discussion of the most relevant topics together and perhaps exchange knowledge with other researchers. The girl was ready to lend a helping hand to Isabel and even publish her knowledge in a scientific journal, as this would give her the opportunity to become the owner of intelligence, which would become her intellectual property. Embarrassed, with a slight blush on her cheeks, the girl admitted that she did not need achievements and recognition from the scientific community at all, since her true intentions were far from seeking fame and public approval. Karen tried to convince the princess to change her mind, explaining that standing out from the crowd does not always mean attracting negative attention. In fact, it can be a step towards new opportunities and changes in life. Unable to contain herself, Karen loudly asked where the little girl's ambitions were and noted that someone could very well have stolen the concept created by the little lady, which emphasized the importance of her work and achievements in science. Touched, she clutched the hem of her dress, realizing the bitter truth about why the princess did not want fame and recognition. Her inner experiences and fears turned out to be much deeper than one might assume at first glance. Nervously playing with her fingers, the little girl clearly did not want to waste her time on strangers, as it was very short, and she would like to spend it more meaningfully in the company of close people who would really understand her. Touched, the teacher lowered her head, immersed in her sad thoughts, and her eyes reflected anxious concern about how to help her student in such a difficult situation. Isabel regretfully apologized for upsetting the older lady, to which the latter replied that everything was fine, and if necessary, she was ready to go to the conference herself to support her in this important step. On the girl's hand, on her wrist, was visible the sign of an hourglass, the seal of a curse and death, which reminded her of the dark fate hanging over her and of the time that was passing irrevocably. Since the beginning of recorded history, there had been no recorded cases of a person surviving a curse, and this thought added a special sense of anxiety and tension to the situation. The mentor gently took the princess's hand and squeezed it tightly, trying to convey her support and confidence that they could overcome any difficulties together. The honey badger looked up when he was found, his black eyes sparkling with curiosity, his fluffy fur looking even more attractive in the light of the world around him. Mikhail, with obvious self-control and self-confidence, declared that no one could hide from him, but at that very moment his pet, without waiting for his further words, suddenly bit the boy on the finger, which led to an unexpected development of events. There was a loud, angry cry, and the boy, deeply outraged by what had happened, began to actively protest, wondering why his pet, whom he trusted, had decided to bite him as if it were something natural and habitual. The princess, standing nearby and watching what was happening, remarked with a smile that with such a cruel skin as this animal, the bite of his teeth would seem to him nothing more than an ordinary tickle, which added even more frivolity to the situation. With a merciless tone, the lady said that the pet hardly considered the boy his friend, and that was why Mikhail looked like a real egoist who did not seem to understand the feelings of other creatures around him. The boy, his eyes wide with surprise, asked how the princess could have known his secret, while he held his honey badger in one hand and, with the other, pointed to the animal, expressed complete bewilderment at her insight and knowledge. With a smile that could brighten even the darkest day, the beauty announced that she had simply combined the magic formula and thus learned that her honey badger had eaten the magic stone, making it a true magical beast. Mikhail immediately remembered that his sister, while showing incredible ability and intelligence, studied magic instead of wasting time on sword training, which made her very smart and wise for her age, and this knowledge suddenly illuminated his thoughts. With her arms outstretched, the girl happily offered her pet to sit in her arms instead of staying next to her cruel brother, who, as it turned out, was not so kind to his furry friend. Without a second's hesitation, the animal instantly rushed into the baby's arms, spreading its paws as if wanting the warmth and tenderness that she could offer it, completely ignoring its owner. The pet, being in the princess's arms, pressed closer to her, clearly loving her more than his owner, whom he had previously bitten, and this emphasized how strong their bond and trust was between them. Isabel, with a determined mood, raised her hand up and used her magic, which added a special sparkle to the atmosphere, as if foreshadowing magical events that were about to happen. At that moment, the pet began to shine with bright rainbow colors and golden light, creating an incredible spectacle around itself, which certainly captivated everyone present and filled their hearts with hope and admiration. The honey badger, suddenly able to speak, confidently told his owner that he had never liked him, and this confession came as a real shock to the boy, who had not expected such a revelation from his pet. An awkward silence fell between the children, filling the space with a sense of tension and confusion, as if neither knew what to say or how to respond to the animal's unexpected words. With bewilderment and irritation, Mikhail asked why the pet refused to be friends with him, and at that moment, the animal responded with bright sarcasm, which clearly emphasized their difficult relationship and the contrast between their perceptions. Instead of trying to justify or apologize, the beast seemed to have no intention of changing his mind and instead directly stated that he considered the boy his feeding trough, causing him to freeze in complete shock, unable to comprehend what he had heard. Given a second chance to express his feelings, the pet did not change his opinion of Mikhail, and with slight contempt called the prince an idiot, which once again confirmed how badly their relationship was spoiled and how difficult their interactions were. After this, the honey badger snuggled closer to the princess and affectionately called her his protector, which made the moment even more touching and emphasized how much the animal appreciated her support and care in difficult times. The animal quickly became attached to the lady and began to call her his mistress and favorite, which clearly indicated how deep and strong their connection was, even despite the recent misunderstandings between him and Mikhail. To the girl's surprise, the honey badger said the word surname as he sat on her hands, and this moment became a real revelation, showing how far they had come in understanding each other and the animal's magical abilities. After thinking for a while, the girl decided to name her new pet Honey, which in her opinion suited him very well, and this name became a symbol of their friendship and unity in this magical world. Karen, with surprise in her voice, asked if the princess had managed to write down a report on the honey badger's thoughts, which emphasized her interest and admiration for how quickly the little girl managed to study the world around her. The woman was truly impressed by the fact that during the absence of her mentor, the little girl had managed to study theories and apply them in practice, which spoke of her mental abilities and desire for knowledge. The honey badger must have been an intelligent magical beast to form such a strong bond with the princess, and this only confirmed the importance of their relationship as they journeyed through this amazing world together. However, this could not be reality, and therefore, most likely, Isabel herself took the liberty of making the honey badger more human, giving him the amazing ability to talk, which became a real miracle in their world. The woman's hands gripped the hem of her dress tightly, and her gaze showed a multitude of emotions that she was trying to hide, as if she was aware of the huge role she had played in this process and how it had affected their lives. The little girl beamed with happiness when she heard praise for a job well done in her studies, and her joy was so genuine that it filled the atmosphere around her with warmth and light, making everyone smile. Karen, leaning closer, admitted that she was looking forward to new achievements from her student, and this only emphasized how much she believed in the girl's abilities and her desire to develop and grow. The emperor's daughter hugged her pet tighter, rejoicing at her new friend, and her eyes shone with joy and gratitude for the fact that this amazing creature had appeared in her life, with whom she could share her experiences and secrets. Suddenly, a strange hand grabbed the animal by the skin and pulled it from the girl's hands, saying that someone should have gone back home already, and this unexpected gesture interrupted their touching moment.
The beast, feeling drawn to his calling, headed towards the entrance, which was blocked by stones, which gave the whole event an atmosphere of mystery and adventure. While he sought new opportunities for the time had come for the baby to take on his true form, and magic swirled around him like magical whirlwinds, creating an atmosphere full of anticipation and exciting emotions that literally filled the honey badger's paws began to transform into powerful claws, symbolizing metamorphosis and readiness for new challenges. And instead of the usual fur, his human face with dark hair and piercing eyes gradually appeared. And instead of the honey badger's usual fur, a human face with dark hair and piercing eyes gradually appeared, symbolizing his transformation and readiness to accept a new appearance in this magical world. Now, instead of the honey badger, there stood a young man in a shabby shirt and ordinary trousers, looking a little disheveled, but this only emphasized the natural charisma and ease inherent in the young soul. He was a very handsome boy with big eyes, in which a spark of magic burned, which attracted attention and fascinated everyone around him, as if he was created from dreams and fantasies themselves. The young man's feet stepped onto the stone, as if it had descended from the air, and landed softly on the ground, giving the whole event a sense of lightness and grace that was inherent only to the boy's name was Aaron, and he was not alone in the cave. There was an air of mystery and anticipation about him that suggested the adventure was just beginning, and that amazing discoveries lay ahead. A figure of a woman with pale skin, dressed in a dark dress, and long black hair fluttering behind her, slowly approached him from afar, creating an aura of mystery and attraction around her, which made her even more enigmatic. It was a beauty in the form of a black dragon, whose name was Camellia, a luxurious woman with grace and magic that enveloped her like a mysterious light, attracting the glances and admiration of others. Holding his head, the boy told his mother that he remembered absolutely nothing about what happened before he turned back into a human, and this lack of memories greatly disturbed him, causing a storm of emotions in his. The girl leaned over her son and asked him his name. The boy thought the question was stupid, since she had called him by his name before, and this created a strange feeling that he might be lost even in his own memory. With a gentle smile on her lips, the woman explained that since the boy was a young dragon, only 100 years old, he should keep his consciousness in good shape so as not to lose touch with the very essence of his existence and his. Camellia raised her hand up and stopped next to the boy's head, asking if he would allow her to look at his memories, and in her eyes there was a glimmer of hope that this would help not only him, but also her to better understand their connection and what happened. By placing her hand on the boy's hair, the woman was able to get under his skin and look into his head, using her magical abilities to explore his thoughts and the memories that were stored in his mind. There, in the memory, were memories of a young princess who had recently arrived at the palace, and that moment was filled with vivid emotions that reflected the joy and delight of the new life that had opened up before Aaron. Pleased with the useful memories she had found, Camellia leaned over to her son and drew parallels, arguing that he had gained a wonderful experience and a lesson that would help him develop and grow in the future. Aaron, confused, asked what kind of experience he had, and his voice was full of curiosity, because he wanted to sort out his feelings and understand what had really happened in his life recently. The woman, tenderly telling her son that he should do some things to grow up and become a good adult. And at that moment, they were sitting in a luxurious room, surrounded by magnificent furniture that emphasized their status. When asked if he wanted to hear an interesting story, Aaron nodded, and his eyes lit up with anticipation, because he knew that every story his mother told was always full of wisdom and amazing adventures that enriched his. Raising her finger up, the woman began to tell that a long time ago, there lived a black dragon who called himself the personification of destruction and secrecy, and this name became a symbol of his power and mystery. Aaron didn't get angry and said that the name was very crazy, as if it was invented by a 5-year-old child, which added lightness and fun to the conversation, because in his eyes, the name looked completely ridiculous and funny. It was known to all that dragons were born predators, and from birth they had innate instincts that made them excellent hunters and magicians, ready for any challenge, which only emphasized their greatness in the world. Dragons had sharp claws that allowed them to easily control magic, as well as undeniable physical strength that allowed them to overcome any obstacles in their path, making them truly formidable creatures. And so this dragon, who ruled the world and had all the possibilities, one day became bored, and he yawned from boredom, opening his mouth wide, as if he was looking for a way to entertain himself and bring back interest in a life filled with adventures. He yawned with boredom, opening his mouth wide, and this state of invisible despondency only emphasized his boredom from a monotonous life full of destruction and a lack of new impressions that could entertain him. In an attempt to amuse himself, the monster decided to go and attack other creatures to show off his strength and power that he had accumulated over the years of his rule, wanting to prove that he was still the ruler of this world. But one day, a man was found who dared to confront the monster and was not afraid to stand in his way, ready to challenge the dragon's power, which in itself was already a significant act, full of courage and determination. The dragon stopped destroying everything in its path when a man appeared before it, who decided to calm the monster by giving it a gift that could change their relationship and return at least a piece of happiness and peace to it. By giving the monster a ring with a precious stone, the man hoped to calm the dragon and establish contact with it that would allow them to understand each other on a deeper level than was previously possible. It sounded ridiculous, but that's how it was. A man fell in love with a dragon and promised to make him happy if he accepted the ring, and this promise became the beginning of an amazing journey that changed the destinies of both creatures forever. Despite his stupidity, the man was nice and sweet, always smiling, and this good-natured nature of his created an atmosphere of warmth and comfort around him that could overshadow even the darkest moments. The mother explained to her son that kindness was a terrible force in this world, and it was worth fearing, because such kindness could attract both positive and negative consequences, which everyone should remember. After this incident, the scaled monsters began to realize that they were not perfect and began to behave differently, realizing that it was important to be mindful of their actions and consider the feelings of other creatures. Therefore, a law was established according to which small dragons like the boy had to study so as not to harm themselves and others, because knowledge about the world around them made them stronger and wiser. Living as other animals became necessary to understand how other creatures lived, and this helped dragons develop empathy and build relationships with other creatures in their diverse and complex world. But for complete immersion, the dragon's consciousness was erased so as not to interfere with its development and not to distract from important moments that were supposed to help it adapt to the new world and its rules. Clutching his forehead, Aaron listened attentively to his mother's instructions as she explained to him the basics of dragon life, revealing to him the secrets and knowledge that were necessary for his growth and understanding of his place in the world. The boy stopped his mother's story and asked what the name Honey meant when it suddenly appeared in his mind. And at that moment, he began to realize that this name had become an important symbol of connection to his. When his mother asked him where he heard these words from, Aaron looked away and lied that it just came to his mind, and his heart shook with anxiety, because he did not want to reveal his true feelings and experiences. Squinting, the woman noted to herself that this was strange, and the boy should have forgotten his name given to him by the princess, as this could cause unnecessary questions and lead to undesirable consequences for their safety. At this time, the little girl, clutching her head, was shaking all over with fear, experiencing horror and excitement that accumulated in her when she thought about what it was like to be part of a world full of dangers and the knight, telling the story of the evil black dragon, suddenly realized that he had frightened the little girl, because his words painted too vivid and scary pictures that could make her heart beat faster from fear and anxiety. The man himself did not remember the full name of the scaly monster, and continued to call it something like something there, which only emphasized his own misunderstanding and unwillingness to delve into the details associated with this terrible creature. Hiding her face behind her hands, the princess was horrified to learn that the dragon was destroying everything in its path and was a real monster, capable of causing horror and panic in everyone who was near it. The look of the huge eyes with lights inside was terrifying and piercing, giving the feeling that behind this look, there was not only a bestial nature, but also deep emotions full of anger and sadness. Isabel couldn't shake the feeling that the black dragon had been somewhere near her all this time, as if his presence was a part of her life, a reminder that fear and danger could always be closer than it seemed. The man hastened to calm the lady, saying that earlier the monster had promised to improve and become an assistant to people and warriors, and his words were supposed to serve as consolation in this anxious moment, when hope and fear were intertwined in her heart. The little girl's mouth dropped open in surprise when she learned that her family's first ancestor had contact with a dragon, and that this monster had become the protector of the imperial family, adding greatness to her legacy and emphasizing the importance of their lineage. In her past life, Virgo was reading a novel with great interest while lying in a hospital bed, but she didn't realize that the novel was about a guardian dragon of the empire that was related to her family. And this discovery now left her in shock. Moreover, the imperial family was protected by the father, the head of the family, and the ruler of the country, Ron, which strengthened her perception of history because she always dreamed of great feats and legends associated with her ancestors. Lancer couldn't help but be happy at how sweetly the girl defended her father, and his heart filled with pride at her bravery, as she showed the confidence and loyalty that was so valuable during their difficult times. Mikhail, sitting with the magic stone in his hand, grimaced from the unpleasant taste that surprised him, and this expression added comedy to the situation, making everyone around him smile and laugh. Across from the boy sat a girl, watching as her brother nearly shattered his teeth after trying to eat the magic stone, and her eyes filled with worry and laughter as she realized how reckless he had been to want to test the stone's power. The stone was passed from hand to hand as if it were a valuable artifact that not only attracted attention, but was also full of magic, ready to reveal its secrets. In the hands of the princess was a magical element associated with the breath of the wind, blue in color and shining like the morning sun, which gave it incredible beauty and attractiveness, capturing the imagination of Isabel. Offered the stone to the honey badger, and in doing so was able to intrigue it, knowing that this gift could attract the creature's attention and establish a bond between them based on trust. The animal did not think for long, and having accepted the gift, held it with its paws, as if realizing that this stone could become not just an object, but a key to new adventures and amazing discoveries. The children stood looking down at the pet with interest, listening attentively to his speech, full of jokes and funny comments that made them smile and strengthened their connection with this magical creature. The little girl tried to call the animal named Honey, but he became stubborn and muttered something under his breath, as if he did not want to answer her call, showing his whims and peculiar character, which only added to his charm. After the girl called him by his full name, the beast regained his good mood and, jumping cheerfully, threw himself into the princess's arms, sitting on her hands and showing his affection and trust, which only strengthened their bond. In the underground storage of the empire, a man with blonde hair walked past the barrels and cold corridors in dark clothes, his figure standing out against the gloomy surroundings, creating an atmosphere of mystery and tension. With his hand, he felt his steps leaving traces on the stone floor, and he continued to follow the traces of mana, not understanding who could have left such a strong trace that beckoned him forward and attracted his attention. Byton stood frozen in place, not believing his feelings as guesses began to enter his mind, causing him to wonder who it could be and what the true nature of the mysterious presence in this dark place was. The richly furnished room of the estate exuded an atmosphere of grandeur and luxury, where every element of the interior spoke of the high status of its owner, and a history rich in tradition. Rubbing his head with his hand, the emperor asked the courtier if he had managed to find the kidnapper, his voice sounding with notes of anxiety and concern, because not only his name, but also the safety of the entire empire depended on it. Byton, who was standing opposite, admitted that, frankly speaking, he could not find any evidence or clues that could indicate the location of the criminal, and this disappointment was reflected on his face. Looking away from the man, he added that he had never liked Karen's mentor, and these words concealed a long-suppressed dislike that had arisen from their interaction. This magician in white constantly looked at the little princess in a strange way, which did not escape the attention of those around him, and his behavior caused slight concern in everyone who was nearby. The emperor also could not help but notice the holy wizard's greedy gaze, and this detail made him wary, because such emotions could foreshadow dangerous plans and intrigues. A crowd of people stood in the square, waiting for news about the condition of the little princess, their eyes full of hope and anxiety, which emphasized the importance of what was happening at that moment. But it was the adult magician who smiled slyly, not taking his eyes off the young sorceress, and there was something suspicious in his eyes that made those around him feel slightly uneasy about his intentions. The emperor could not help but agree with his assistant that the kidnapper should have been caught and punished then and there, since not only the restoration of justice, but also the safety of the entire empire depended on this. Ron was angry at the knight for failing to catch and find the escaped villain, and this disappointment underscored his sense of responsibility to protect his people and loved ones. Byton, turning the spotlight on the situation, said that their underground storage facility had frozen, and this news caught the attention of everyone present, raising many questions about the cause of such an incident. However, he did not believe that it was a planned crime. Rather, he assumed that it could simply be an explosion of mana, and his certainty of this added a pinch of levity to the general atmosphere of alarm. Coughing into his fist, the guy added that it was more of a beginner's mistake, and his voice sounded confident that such a failure should not be a reason for panic, but only a lesson for the future. Ron, listening emotionlessly, realized that it was the princess's magic that had caused the snow in the dungeon, and he seemed unimpressed by this fact, which added extra tension to their conversation. There was a silence between the men, as if Byton's words were hanging in the air, finding no response, and each of them wondered what consequences this strange phenomenon might have. Receiving no response, Byton once again explained to the ruler that the vault had frozen in the middle of summer, which was truly surprising, as such an event was extremely unusual and had no logical explanation. Clutching the gloves in his palms, Byton began to praise the young princess's magic, emphasizing her incredible abilities that could change the fate of their world and strengthen its defenses. In other words, the little girl was a real genius in magic, a future witch, capable of great deeds, and this talent caused respect and admiration in everyone. Reeling from his impassioned speech, the man caught his breath, realizing how his words could influence the opinions of those around him about the future of their empire and the princess's role in it. To these words, the emperor merely remarked that this was natural, since the princess was his daughter, and in this statement there was a sound of pride for her talents, which, in his opinion, should arouse respect and admiration in everyone around her. The knight, sighing in confusion, finally realized that every father was proud of his daughter, and with slight regret said that he was still far from the emperor, because he had always been on a pedestal of respect and authority that was difficult to. Winter was approaching, and the estate was gradually covered with snow, creating a magical atmosphere around that was reminiscent of fairy tales and the magic contained in every snowflake falling from the sky. The princess quickly lost herself in time as she sat at the table, immersed in the study of magic, as the pages of books opened before her, like doors to a new world full of secrets and mysteries. Karen has not yet returned, and so the girl decided to continue studying magic on her own, determined to master new knowledge and skills that will help her become a real sorceress. There were rumors that William had disappeared from society, and this mysterious disappearance raised many questions and speculations among the locals, leaving everyone in the dark as to the reasons for his absence. It was unclear whether the man's disappearance was somehow connected to Karen, and this thought only increased anxiety, giving rise to additional talk about the possible reasons for his disappearance. Shaking her head from side to side, Isabel reminded herself to focus on her studies, as her desire to become the best witch required her to give her full attention to her studies, not allowing herself to be distracted from her important. Suddenly, the little girl was distracted by another voice, and at that moment, her brother Mikhail ran into the room with bright lights and warmth, full of energy and joy, as if he had just returned from an amazing adventure. He offered, with a beaming smile on his face, to take his sister to a wonderful place where they could have fun sledding, and this offer filled the heart with happiness, delight, and anticipation of fun adventure. The princess somehow admitted that she had never been sledding before, and this discovery filled her heart with a slight excitement, because new impressions and joy from this winter entertainment awaited her ahead. The boy, noticing her hesitation, raised his hand up and confidently invited his sister to trust him, promising that everything would be safe and fun, as befits brothers and sisters. He was also willing to go and help her build a snowman, which added even more fun to their winter plans, and this desire only strengthened the bond between them. Thinking that this was a good moment, Isabel asked her brother if she could now rejoice, and her voice sounded hopeful, because she wanted confirmation of her dream of winter fun. Having received positive permission, the little girl happily jumped from her seat, spreading her arms and smiling from ear to ear, which emphasized her sincere joy and impatience for the upcoming adventures. The manager, touched by the situation, said that they could not leave the palace without an escort, and this decision caused a feeling of uneasiness among all those present, because the children's desire to play in the fresh air was. Lancer hastened to reassure his wife, assuring her that he would go with the children and look after them, promising to do everything possible to ensure their safety and allow them to enjoy the winter fun. However, the woman did not fall for her husband's persuasion, and firmly stated that he was not trustworthy, since too often his promises of safety turned out to be empty words, and her anxiety only grew with each passing minute. Suddenly, another man, dressed all in white, with the same blonde hair, approached them, and with a kind smile offered his candidacy for the role of an escort, adding a note of hope to their conversation. It was the Emperor's assistant with a sweet smile, Lord Byton, who seemed to understand all their worries, and was ready to offer his help to make this day special and safe.